department myself, so.
Just kind of let the chair move and settle down here. This side, yeah.
How you doing, Dave?
Oh, good.
I said, when do you have time to sleep?
What's that?
I said, when do you have time to sleep? You're down at Warriors Mark and all that.
I don't.
Keep you busy.
Yep, that's for sure. Supervisors ready, staff ready. All right. We call this meeting to order at 7:01. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. We have a big crowd here tonight, so, please don't talk amongst yourselves in the back. If you have to have a conversation, please take it outside. That way, everybody else can hear. We're going to be recorded live for CNET's YouTube channel this evening, and then we're going to go to public comments. There are 3 opportunities for the public to speak at this meeting. We have a couple things. One is the first public comments on the agenda is going to be for anything on or off the agenda, with the exception of the ordinance is going to be put up for a public hearing under number 8. And then when the Board of Supervisors does its review through what I assume everybody's here for, the R1 district change, when we get done talking about it, we will allow public comments on that particular thing. So, because I know some people may be here to talk about other stuff, and I don't want to get ordinance-related items confused with fire company-related items or something like that. So, first up, public comments for anything other than the proposed ordinance and the R1 district modification. Please. Oh. Sorry, I thought you were just looking for a seat.
Good evening, Cliff Neal, 386 Schnelly Drive in Halfmoon Township. I am here on behalf of Port Matilda EMS, mostly as an informational visit. I wanted to update you that our membership drive is nearly completed. We received about 20% of the membership flyers that was sent out, which for EMS is not bad actually, but we are critically dependent upon these memberships to run our service, and I'd like to remind everybody of that. I'd also like to thank the people that were kind enough to send in an extra contribution in addition to membership. It's very, very welcome. We are working on expanding our building for 2 more bays, and we should have our suggestions coming in by the 15th of this month, and I can update you next month about where we're going and who we've chosen for a contractor for that. Lastly, I'd like to just say that our non-emergency transport service is up and running very, very well, and we have added a little incentive if anybody is interested in Halfmoon Township, that we're not only paying $10 an hour for people to drive the non-emergency van, but there's a $5 an hour on-call coverage that will cover for just, you can hang around your house, you can go to the store, you can do whatever you want to do, and you'll still make $5 an hour. And I'd also like to open it up if anybody has any questions for Fort Matilda EMS. Yes, sir.
One question, Cliff. What is the address for the Port Matilda EMS?
That's an excellent question. What is it?
402 South.
402.
I apologize.
Well, and can you say that so we can hear it?
402 South High Street.
High Street. Port on 6870, right?
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
How many non-emergency transports are you getting roughly in a month?
In a month, we're doing, as far as the last update I got was about 3 to 4 a week right now. So 12, 15 a month.
So hopefully you're bringing in some revenue on that.
Yeah, the nice thing about non-emergency transport is it's prepaid. It's, it's pre-scheduled, it's prepaid. So you're not hoping somebody's gonna be kind enough to return the check that they got from their insurance company or whatever it might be. So it's a nice way for us to make kind of guaranteed return on trips.
And for anybody that hasn't seen it, the new equipment is fantastic looking.
Oh yeah, we have a brand, if you're interested in driving a non-emergency van, it's brand new. So, that's it for me.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
sir. Ms. Smith? Or Hughes? Sorry.
Okay. My name is Donna Hughes, and I live on Marengo Road in Halfmoon Township. And I'm here concerning our ongoing agenda. And that is, I would like to suggest the removal of this Section 2 on Halfmoon meeting etiquette. I have been coming to these meetings for several years now, and not once have I heard anyone on this side of the room be disrespectful. Yes, they've often been impassioned and so forth, but not disrespectful. And I think this kind of something on the agenda right up front intimidates people, and they think that they are not being welcomed to speak. So my suggestion is that it be removed.
Okay, thank you.
Can I bring up a second thing?
Sure, you're there.
Okay. The other thing I would like to do is suggest that we bring back committee reports. I think citizens are often here to find out what's going on. And yes, you can say they're online, but I say one thing, they're not only online, but if anyone has a question, they're told to go see the author of the report. They're not even, they're not even welcome to come to the meeting and ask questions. And I think also the last 2 months where we've had meetings that are less than 15 minutes long is an indication that we do have time for committee reports. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have anything not related to the, yes?
Hi everyone, I'm Lenore Foster of the Ever Beautiful Ike Circle. I come by every year at this time to make a pitch for Port Matilda EMS and Center Gibbs. We've been part of Center Gibbs for 2 years now, and it has been our largest moneymaker, and we really need to support it. Center Gives, if you don't know, is an online community-wide giving event organized by Center Foundation. This year there will be over 130 county-wide nonprofit organizations participating, and they're going to be awarding an extra $500,000 to these nonprofits in prize money in addition to the donations. Center Gives is not associated with United Way or any other event, and has been named the best fundraising event for 11 years in a row. All the money donated goes to the organizations in Center County. Last year it raised $2.5 million, and over the past 11 years, almost $20 million have been awarded. Port Matilda EMS has received approximately $7,000 and $9,000 in the past 2 years in donations and prizes, which were used to purchase much needed equipment for the EMTs in the station. Donating is easy and secure. Donors can go to centergives.org or the Port Matilda EMS Facebook page or website to donate beginning at 8 a.m. on May 14th to 8 p.m. on May 15th, 36 continuous hours. They can also call the Center Foundation. Credit cards are only accepted, and the Center Foundation will email the donor a receipt for tax purposes. Each donation given during Center Gives is increased with the funds in the pool from the Center Foundation and the Hamer Foundation. Each nonprofit is estimated to receive about 14% more than the amount donated with these additional funds. In addition, hourly prizes are awarded, and they start at $250 from funds donated by local businesses. For many organizations, Center Gives is the single biggest fundraiser of the year. The minimum donation is only $10, and even if you're not able to give this year, please talk to your friends and family. Each donation shows support for the Port Matilda EMS and indicates to us that our service is recognized in the community. Have your friends follow and like the Port Matilda EMS Facebook page, because we will be giving updates throughout the event. We will have announcements coming out in the weeks ahead. When minutes count, our Port Matilda EMS is ready with professional and compassionate EMTs to help our local community. Spend 5 minutes of your time to show how important this service is to you and make sure it continues. And I have some handouts that I'll leave on the table if anybody would like to grab one. It's a save your date. And Amy always takes a couple of these to hang. Okay, thank you. I have one more thing real fast. Since I'm a member of the fundraising committee, I told them I would give everybody an update on some of our other fundraisers. We're doing a lot more fundraising this year because we really need to. There's going to be a hanging basket fundraiser coming in May, the annual soup and sandwich sale on Election Day. In June, we're having a make and take succulent workshop, a duck float in the summer, and the flamingo flocking is going to be starting up again in May. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Next up, approval of the minutes. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of March 13th, 2025? A motion, do I hear a second? Second. Moved and second. Any discussion by the board? Call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Consent agenda. I'm not going to read it, but do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda? Do I hear a second? Moved and second. Any questions for the board? Call for the question. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Permanent part-time labor position. This is to hire Lance Brown as a permanent part-time public works laborer. Do I hear a motion to do that? Do I hear a second? Moved and seconded. Any discussion by the board? Call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Next up, advertise for 2025 project bids. Let our roadmaster just do a very brief rundown on that.
Sure. So like we discussed back in October at budget time, we had planned for an asphalt overlay of Eve Street, which would just obviously be the township portion of that street, as well as Orchard Road getting a fiber mat and fog seal coating. This would be from where we had stopped, I believe in 2022, if my dates are correct, at Cherrywood Way, and this would go to the township line. So that would just kind of seal off the rest of that road. What I'm requesting tonight is that we can advertise for bids for these projects. How it was given to me from our municipal service representative, he feels that it would be better to advertise the Eve Street project out for formal bids, but the Orchard Road fiber mat project, he would like me to get phone and email quotes for that. He feels that by splitting that project up, we'll get a more competitive pricing. So at that point, that is my plan moving forward, as long as the board so approves it.
I hear a motion from the board either to do it together or split the bid.
So I'll move to split the bid.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion by the board?
So 2 projects, Chuck?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Two similar projects, but a little bit different process.
What do they think the total expenditure is going to be on that?
Approximately 60,000. I don't think it's going to be quite that high, but
I guess we'll see what the price of oil is, huh?
Yep, yep.
And we don't have anything else planned for the summer?
As far as contracted projects, no. Lots of in-house projects, continuing with the Smith Road widening and lots of
Anything else from the board?
stormwater stuff. But.
Call for the question. All those in favor of doing it by as a split bid signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion approved. Next up, public hearing for street and fire protection revisions, and I will ask our planner to give us a brief rundown.
Sure. As you know, over the past couple months, staff has been reviewing the saldo amendments for the, just mostly a cleanup, and we added some additional language required, or requested by the township roadmaster and township engineer dealing with road width and sidewalk regulations. Addition to that, we removed the requirement of a sprinkler system or cistern for any properties, residential properties outside of the community water system, and they were the changes.
All right. And if you don't have public water available, I see there's a detail in there about fire hydrants. What's our stance on that?
The stance right now is, I believe we actually fall back to the fire department for that, but there's about a 750-foot distance between fire hydrant.
Okay.
And that stayed the same.
That stays the same?
Yeah, we didn't touch any of that.
Okay. All right. Does the board have any questions before we open the public hearing of our planner? Okay. It is 7:16 PM. I'm going to open a public hearing for public comment and questions for the proposed street and fire protection revisions. So, the meeting's officially open. Would anybody like to comment on proposed changes to the street and fire protection regulations? And seeing none, I guess we can close the hearing. It's 7:17. And since the hearing is closed, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the ordinance 2025-02, amending the township regulations. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded by the board. Is there any discussion regarding the ordinance?
Dave, just to clarify, you're moving the whole one as it's written here?
Yeah.
Okay, is that okay, or do we need to repeat it? Is that good? Okay.
Hearing no other comments, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, that's taken care of. Next up is review of residential zoning ordinance amendments and possible motion to send to the solicitor for legal review with any or all changes. Before we get into this too far, what's happened is the Planning Commission has sent us an ordinance for the board's consideration. Any motion tonight does not make it law. It does not make it a permanent, a fixed thing. All it says is the board has agreed to whatever we come up with when we're having done with our discussion, to send it on to the solicitor for review. At any point, the solicitor may come back and say, this is okay, this is not okay, your wording's wrong, whatever it is. At some point, that ordinance would come back to the supervisors after the review and comment by planning and the county. And then it would be advertised for a public hearing, the same as the previous ordinance. At that time, the public is invited to come in and make comments and give official testimony. You can submit documents, you can talk about it, you can do whatever you want, you know, as long as you're following municipal procedures. So this is not an adoption tonight. This is a discussion by the board, and we are going to allow the public to comment once the board goes down through everything. That way you can hear what's going on before we start talking, because I don't want the, not that I don't want the public's input, but some people in the room here, I'm sure, are familiar with the draft, and some people have no idea what the draft says. And just because it says something doesn't mean that the board agrees with it. So that's how we're going to start the process. We're going to have our planner just give a brief rundown on what we're talking about, and then we'll start digging into the ordinance.
Sure. As you all know, the past couple months, we've been doing a comprehensive update on all of the zoning districts. We did the A1 a few weeks ago. As part of this, we started reviewing the R1 district probably about 8 months ago at this point, and found some inconsistencies in, just normal inconsistencies with ordinance fallback and things like that. While we're in there as well, we noticed that the restrictions for keeping of animals and agriculture was actually less restrictive in the R1. So after many meetings, a lot of emotional meetings, we ended up coming up with a table
Excuse me, Corey. You said less?
less restrictive.
Restrictive than what?
The R1 was less restrictive than the A1 was for the keeping of animals and for agricultural.
Okay,
Comment or-
proceed.
Okay.
Okay. So for what we brought tonight, it is a table which just utilizes setbacks and lot sizes and things like that. That's just for ease of use. There is a fencing requirement for non-commercial keeping of animals, of non-commercial domestic livestock, I should say. And there is a lot size for the keeping of non-commercial livestock. And I think that's probably what most people are here to discuss. And again, I should say this was recommended by the PC. It was not a unanimous decision, but it was still, motion did carry.
Okay, is that all that's being proposed?
There are differences in setback. The setbacks are changing as well.
Let's talk about the setbacks.
Okay. Currently, right now, for a single-family dwelling, the side and rear are 15. The front would be 75 feet from the center line of 550, or 45 feet from collector and arterial streets. What is being proposed, too many papers in front of me, I apologize, is front setback of 50 feet from the front yard property line. State route would be 75 feet from the front yard property line. Side would be 30, and rear would be 30 for just single-family dwellings. If you're going to use ag, if it's an ag use or domestic keeping of livestock, it would be 50 feet side and rear.
In an ag district.
No, in the resident, and this is in the R1.
And what is that again?
It would be 50 feet for side yard and 50 feet for rear if it's an ag use or if you have the non-keeping of domestic livestock.
Now, that setback applies to structures, not animals, correct?
Yeah, that's the, yep, structures and fencing, because there are fencing requirements, as I mentioned as well.
But the proposal for the keeping of non-commercial livestock, domestic livestock, is restricted in that regard.
It
the
goes down
limitation-
to have any keeping of any non-commercial domestic livestock, you have to have a 3-acre minimum.
Get that 3-acre minimum.
Now, I should admit, I should say this before everyone else, anyone that has that lot now, that is a non-conforming use, which is pre-existing, which is not affected by any of this.
I understand, but should people stop having animals and then decide a couple years later they want them again? Is that not, do they not have to conform with the new ordinance?
The way our non-conforming ordinance sits is if it remains vacant or unused for a year, then it falls under the new regulations. And that's for if the property would sell, it's the same way. The new person that would buy that property would have up to a year from point of sale to add horses or whatever was there previously.
Now, setbacks. Existing structures, yes, they're grandfathered or they're
Yes.
considered, but they are classified non-conforming. So when you own a property and the setbacks are increased, then your property, if you have structures within, that were within the previous or the current ordinance of 15 feet, becomes 30 feet, and that new setback goes beyond, in other words, encompasses part of that structure, it becomes a non-conforming property. Okay? And that is a label on that property that is continuous.
Correct, unless the zoning ordinance would change to allow for different setbacks.
And then when you sell, let's say you sell your property, the new owner comes in, and that nonconformity exists for the existing structures, but not for any new structures.
No, that's correct.
The new setbacks would apply to new structures.
Well, that also sits for the homeowner that's previously there now. For new structures, you wouldn't be.
Right, even
So-
even the current
Even
owner
the
would have
current
to
owners, you can't do anything.
conform to the new setbacks.
For any new buildings that would be put on the property.
I'm just curious as to the history of this. Where the idea came from. What was the compelling reason for doing it? What compelled the staff to develop these new requirements?
Well, I should say staff and planning commission, so.
Staff and planning
so
commission.
just so we have that.
Whoever, I mean, what is the compelling purpose?
I think the biggest issue is just to come into more of what a typical, at least with the livestock and agriculture, in a typical residential R1, those types of uses aren't usually prohibited. Now, having said that, this isn't a typical R1 because you're not on public sewer, and most of the township doesn't have public water. But these are the recommendations that were made by staff and planning commission.
Okay, but define typical.
Typical would be an area that has subdivisions with
Patton
smaller.
Township, State College Borough, College Township, Harris Township, Ferguson Township.
Yeah, I mean, any of those places all have R1s. Yep. And some of them, because they're bigger than Half Moon, or at least have a higher population, have different types of residential districts, be it rural residential, R2, R3, high density.
Right, and they also have multiple types use in their townships. Not just residential, but
They
industrial,
would have ag,
commercial.
yeah, with zoning,
All those
you're
type
required to have.
uses. And then we are part of a regional plan where those type uses cover us in our need to provide for those types of uses through this regional plan, my understanding is.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also provide for them the agricultural land and the agricultural activity within our township, because Halfmoon Township is an agricultural township.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, agriculture is fostered, it's encouraged. It is both the nature and the charm
Mm-hmm.
of this township. Okay? And I believe that's why I'm asking the question. Now, maybe I should reserve my comments until we have the comment period and let the public, and I'll keep quiet until we have board discussion, okay? I yield to you. Thank you.
I have a few technical things that I think maybe need clarifying.
Sure.
And some of you may know, or some of you may not, I do land surveying as part of my life, my day job. In the R1 area bulk regulation, it says setbacks, it says 50 feet from front yard property line. There are a lot of properties in this township where the front yard property line is somewhere across the state highway, on the center line of the state highway, center line of the township road. There are a number of lots that were subdivided where the people owned to the center of the road, or originally it was a 33-foot right-of-way, and then it's since changed to a 60 or a 50-foot right-of-way. I'm suggesting that we change that number to accommodate the center line of a road. It says state roads, but, and just get rid of the front property line, because I know from being a zoning officer, sometimes things are not clearly defined, then you get into the fighting over details. And I know it's hard enough when you're staff and you got to enforce this stuff. And then somebody comes out and says, well, I own to the other side of the road. So, I don't know how the board feels about that, but we can bring that up. But that's just something I see that's a comment, or an item of concern that I know is going to come up in the real world for whoever the zoning officer is at some point. What I wanted to do is, rather than just pick and choose, is just kind of go down through and see if anybody had any issues, anything in particular. If it's a technical item or whatever, and then once we get through the technical stuff, if you have a technical thing, then we can talk about the ordinance itself, and then we can decide where it's going to go, and then we can open up for public comment once we kind of have an idea of how the board's going to view this thing. So, I will tell you that, I know there's just for me personally, when I first came to be employed by this township many moons ago, side and rear setbacks were, I think 25, I know the side was 25 feet. I don't remember what the rear setbacks were. I think they might have been 25 as well. That was sort of an issue for the public, which is why it got changed to 15 feet back in probably 1994, 95, somewhere in that zone. And I suppose it makes a difference. I don't know how the crowd feels, and I don't know how the other supervisors feel. I don't have a problem having like a 30-foot setback for the main building, but if somebody has a garage or a shed or something like that, you know, some ordinances allow you to slide that building. You know, it's not an occupied building, it's just a building for storage or whatever. If it's in the rear yard, it could be, you know, like maybe down to a 10-foot line or something. I mean, you do pay taxes on the whole property, so why shouldn't you be able to use some of it? That's just my opinion. So that's what I see. I'm not going to get into the details on the animal part of it. I think that's for later. But if anybody sees anything that's technical that the board has noticed.
Again, if I may,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I'm looking for a compelling reason why we're doing this. We're spending not only a lot of time, but a lot of money. Okay, and this, in my opinion, is a significant issue because it does encroach on people's ability to use their properties. So I want to know, I want to understand the compelling reason for these changes. This has existed, these setbacks have existed for 30 years. Okay, and I'm sure you're always going to get complaints. We're always going to get complaints from people. I think that guy's putting his building too close to the property line, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, you know, that's the way things are. That's life. Okay, but we can't let that drive our desire to change ordinances, to change the people's ability to use their properties. And keep in mind, the properties these days are a lot more expensive than they used to be. And houses are larger than they used to be. So, you know, people pay all this money to buy a property in the country only to be told you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. Okay, and as far as animals are concerned, I can't remember the last time I had a problem with somebody's domestic animals causing me a problem, coming onto my property, doing whatever. Yeah, things smell, there's noises, there's smells, there's all these different things that go with living in the country. But we get that from farms too. But nobody wants to get rid of the farms. I mean, but here we are, we want to talk about, again, more restrictions on R1 property owners. Okay, R1 property owners pay 85% of the taxes in this township. And yet here we are, we're going to impose more restrictions on the property owners.
Ron, this is also for protection of people also. And what happened the idea of planning, of good community planning, is to prevent issues and to allow people within reason when they have the property. If you're on an R1 on an 1.5 acre lot, you should be able to put 20 pigs and 3 steers on that lot?
Well,
And
I think having animals is self-limiting. I mean, yes, you're gonna have the occasional person that comes in and does something that disturbs the neighbors. Why can't that be addressed as a nuisance?
Well-
Why do we have to have a more restrictive ordinance? And in terms of safety and preventing problems, you're always gonna have people complain about something. Okay, and I know the staff get complaints. I think most of those complaints should be referred to the township supervisors to address. But here we are, we're gonna change an ordinance. The setback was a surprise to me, to be honest. I knew we were talking about animals. I didn't think we were talking about doubling the setbacks. So that was a big shocker to me. But the other thing is, I don't know how many problems we actually have with animals. I haven't heard about too many problems. I heard about the cows on Lutz Lane. That was the big one. Well, those people complained about that property owner, and that property owner left the township. They took their cows and left. Problem solved.
Ron, I just want to hit the technical stuff
That's fine,
first.
but I think
And
that
we'll get into
having
the
a
weeds
premise,
on part two.
having a premise for a change in an ordinance is, and understand that compelling reason is vital to determining whether or not we should even pursue this and all the costs associated with it, and the impact it will have on the citizens of this township for years and years to come.
Ron, to go with that is, the garage on Ike Circle, how many times we've had a lot of calls on that? Why was that allowed? Why wasn't there an ordinance to prevent that? What can be done about it?
We have a nuisance ordinance.
No,
We've
the-
updated the nuisance ordinance.
Has that worked? No.
Does it have anything to do with
Ron,
animals?
I'm talking, please. And the,
Go ahead, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
it became an issue after it was in. So then we went through and we changed the ordinance so that now no one else in R1 has to worry about having that in their backyard or anywhere in their area. But for the folks that are impacted by that garage, it is there to stay. So why would you not, if we would have been going through the ordinances and looking through it, which we do all the time, we do this all the time, to see where changes are needed, and it's just part of the process. Whether this gets voted on or not is to be, whether it passes or not is to be seen, but no matter what side of the fence you're on, this is the process. This is a process because there have been issues in the past, because the planning commission looked into this, and the majority of this board provided feedback to the planning commission to proceed with this. So,
Okay.
that is why we are here, and this is just part of the process.
I'm going to run back to the technical thing, because I thought somebody
Okay.
else would bring it up, but, up here in R1, it says area and bulk requirements, it says lot coverage maximum 30%, impervious coverage maximum 40%. Can you please give me a breakdown or divide of why, the lot coverage is 30%, the maximum impervious coverage is 40%? I can't get my head wrapped around that one, exactly.
I don't think we changed that from the original. I'm not sure of that either. I have to look.
Impervious surface would be driveways, roofs.
Those have both stayed the same.
They're both identical to what they were.
We didn't
We didn't
revise everything.
revise any of that.
Okay.
We just put that into the table form for.
Should we
ease of
fix that while we're at it?
That's all at the purview of the board.
I'll tell you folks, I see this ordinance as having two things. One is a general revision to the R1 district, has something to do with setbacks and building heights and that kind of stuff. But the other part is the animal part, which we're gonna talk about next. But I just wanna make sure that what's that?
Can you clarify lot coverage?
Well, that's what I'm trying to do. I think there was probably an error way back when, on lot coverage. An acre's 43,560 square feet. So roughly, if you say your impervious coverage is 40%, it's a little bit over 16,000 square feet. That's your house, your driveway. That's a lot of stormwater runoff. That's basically uncontrolled with the exception of maybe a roof sump, in some of the developments that have it. And then it says lot coverage 30%. I'm just trying to figure out how you can have 40% maximum or impervious coverage and 30% maximum lot coverage.
We actually do require sumping for.
Well, I know you do on the new stuff, but I'm just saying on an existing old lot, it's pre-sump requirement. Do you think as our planner, I don't mean to blindside you, but.
No, you're not.
Do you think we should make that consistent or eliminate one of them?
I mean, again, I'm fine with eliminating one of them and just having it, straight across with maximum coverage.
Well, should we say maximum building coverage, maybe 30%, maximum impervious coverage 40%?
We can change that.
Or is that too much?
I think it's all just semantics and different wording.
Yep. I think we, go ahead.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. So what is included, if we have an impervious percentage, how does that differ from your lot coverage?
Lot
percentage?
coverage is just like your house and the buildings, whereas the impervious coverage, like that's your driveway and all the.
It also includes the house and
Yeah,
the garage.
it's everything,
Plus, but
yeah,
it
so it's
adds in the
basically-
driveway or paved areas
Yeah,
and
it's
such like
basically
that.
just saying you can have 30% for the buildings with an additional 10% for any of the other.
Okay.
driveways.
Just so
things
we're
you-
clear on that.
I'm just
Okay.
saying, I think we need a clarification on that.
Is that further defined that way? I mean,
I'm
could I
sure it-
read that where it says it's 30% for the buildings and another additional 10%
It's in
for
the-
impervious
I'm
surfaces?
sure it's in our
It's-
definitions,
All right.
but I can
But I
take
think
a
it's
look.
something we want to make sure of before we send it to the attorney one way or the other, if we're going to go forward.
Sure.
And it's, all you have to say, lot coverage, structures, impervious surface.
Okay.
Just add structures to the end of lot coverage.
Sure.
And I think, if everybody's okay with that general thing. All right, those were the technical things that I saw that I was just concerned of as being a zoning officer, former zoning officer. All right. Let's go back to the beginning. Let's go through Part A, permitted uses. Down there, permitted use, single-family dwelling, minimum lot size, 1 acre, which is mostly what it's been since the beginning. That really hadn't changed. Maximum height, 35 feet, that's not changed. Essential services, what the permitted uses, or what the zoning ordinance defines as what is allowable or can be done in that particular zone. Essential services are generally like ambulance or something like that. If they ever put, so lot size, it says not restricted. An essential service could be a telephone switching building or something like that that might have to go in your community. Maximum height not restricted.
What about, Dave, what if it is an EMS? Is there no size restriction on the lot size for something like that?
Well, if it's permissible as an essential service, it's not restricted. Or not required. I mean, obviously, because we have no public sewer, you'd have to have a big enough lot for septic system and water supply for a commercial type structure. And of course, home occupation, customary related uses or accessory uses, churches and other places of worship, we're talking about 5 acre, minimum lot size, maximum height 35 feet, exemption, 50-foot attached steeple, so you could go up to 50 feet on a steeple. Conditional use would be residential wind turbines. And Corey, can you just give the public a little rundown of what a conditional use entails?
Yeah, there's a process through zoning where you would have to come in and actually put a plan together to show what you're doing. It's potentially an allowable use, but it goes through conditional use hearings and goes through zoning.
If somebody wanted to put a 500-foot tower up in a residential neighborhood, I mean, just if it blew over alone, it would affect a lot of houses. So the supervisors can put conditions at a hearing saying we don't allow a height over 25 or 35 feet or something like that for the tower. The setback would have to be done, a fence would have to be put around it. Those are conditions that the Board of Supervisors would place on something that's a little bit out of the ordinary.
But would there be a size limitation on it as
Well,
well?
the board would establish that based on what it is. Public and private child care facilities, kindergarten, elementary schools, secondary schools, 5 acre minimum, maximum height 35 feet. That's pretty much standard fare. Agricultural operations, you're talking about a commercial agricultural operation where you're raising a commercial chicken house or not for private individual use. Somebody that has, I don't know, do we allow like tractor sales? That's really just a regular commercial.
I would think that's a
So,
commercial.
regular commercial, but it would, somebody that's out there and they've got a bunch of harvester silos out there and they're putting corn in them and, it's not for use on the property, it's for use off the property. It's being sold to the large ag dealers, 35 feet maximum height. And the non-commercial keeping of domestic livestock, now this is one of the new thing that's coming up here. The minimum lot size would be 3 acres and the maximum height of the structure to deal with it or in a related operation would be 35 feet. I'm not going to jump into that right away. I'm just going to run down through everything and then we'll come back and talk about it. The bulk area requirements, I expressed my concerns on that, having here, I don't know if anybody feels 30 feet side's too much, too little.
You talking percentages there?
No, we're just talking about the side setback from the
Setbacks.
property line. And as I brought it before, we want to split it, allow you know, some accessory sheds or something that's, you know, less than 500 square feet to be closer to the property line, and the house, the residential house itself would have to be back to the 30. Does the board have any feeling on that? One way or the other?
Why not set the setback back to 15 or 20? Why does it have to be 30?
Well, it
I mean,
doesn't have to
this
be.
is
That's why we're
arbitrary.
having a discussion here. so
Right.
we can
This is
talk about
arbitrary.
that.
Well, for a house, I understand your point, because for a house, 30 feet seems reasonable, but maybe not for a garden shed.
Not if you got a
or-
garden shed in your backyard, you don't wanna.
What about a detached garage?
Well, that's why we're having this discussion. So, if any, you can think of, yeah, go ahead, Tammy.
Mr. Chair, so question for Corey. So if we look at different setbacks, we could have a setback for a house, and the setbacks could be different for garages or sheds
Yeah, they would just need
or-
to be added
or
to the
outbuildings.
table, and then
Okay.
it would be, we'd have to probably update our definitions to give like what a definition of a garage is and things like that, so that it was pretty clear.
Right, so non-inhabited buildings, basically,
Yeah, there's-
is what we're
Yeah.
referring to, I think, in terms of this, so, okay.
How does this affect the location of driveways and sidewalks?
That would fall under our driveway ordinance, which isn't affected, which
Okay.
isn't a part of this right here.
All right.
I think we did require driveways to be set back at least 5 feet from the property line.
I believe that's
Unless you
in
have a
that
shared
ordinance, yes.
driveway, in which case, you know, obviously you'd have a common point.
There was a time when we weren't allowed to share driveways.
The state sort of encourages it on state roads because they don't like multiple
On
points
state
of
roads, yeah,
access.
yeah.
You know, I've been doing this a long time, and I haven't ever seen it one way or the other.
Okay.
The only thing that has been a problem historically in this township and everywhere else in the Commonwealth of PA is the use of private roads. Because without proper private road agreements and maintenance agreements, people sometimes just can't get along because one guy puts in $2 to fix the road and the other guy puts in $1 or nothing, and people get to arguing about it.
Well, I do think there should be a distinction between houses and other buildings, other structures,
Okay, so.
for sure.
We'll set that up for a motion, you know.
And I think it should be restored back to what it is now.
Yeah, Mr., what feet setbacks are you looking at for non-inhabited buildings then?
Well, I don't really have a dog in the fight, but, you know, I could see going back to where we were before, 25 feet, and maybe reducing sheds down to 10 feet, or keeping sheds at 10 or 15 feet.
I think 15 is a good setback.
15 feet
Now,
for sheds,
when it comes to setbacks, there's setbacks for septic systems, for example.
10 feet.
Right, and is it 10 feet?
It's 10 feet to the edge of aggregate in the field.
I mean, I've
or
seen
tanks.
people place drain fields less than 10 feet
Yeah, they're
from
not
a property
supposed to.
line, but what do you do about it?
Yeah,
You know what I mean? You don't ask the guy to tear it up and do it over again.
no, kind of hard to do at that point. so. But how does the rest of the board feel about, they like it where it's at? Do you feel like we ought to allow a reduction for outbuildings and sheds? Is there a square footage that we're comfortable with or not comfortable with?
For anything other than the primary house,
Well, if the board feels that we want to split that.
right, I think we should. I don't know what the
And
rest of
for
you
the
think.
For the crowd, this has nothing to do with the agricultural use, this is just general setbacks. The planning commission and staff had gone down through the ordinance to tighten up some of the R1 district regulations, so we're just throwing out ideas at this
I
point.
would think keeping what's proposed in here for house and anything attached to the house, but for, like as Ron, I agree with Ron for the 15 feet on the
So
non-inhabitable.
you're like 30 feet for the house and 15 feet for non-attached shed. Is there a size that we feel is appropriate?
Do we have a separate ordinance or anything on outbuildings or sheds?
Not that I know of.
But you also have to get permits for these
Right.
things, you know? And
Yep.
as far as other buildings are concerned, you also have a limitation on impervious surfaces,
Right.
which is impacted by the things that you build.
Yeah, That's,
They're all impervious surfaces.
that's
so-
not those numbers are pretty lax.
Right, but the thing is, there is a limit.
Yeah.
And I think setbacks of 15 feet for anything but a house is reasonable.
Non-habitable.
It also allows a little bit of room for error, because some people
Yeah.
sometimes can't measure things.
Yeah, we don't want to get like College Township where you have to.
15 feet is
Have to hire
plenty.
a surveyor to go out and mark
Right.
the lines every time.
And I think we would have a lot of non-conforming properties if we didn't keep that 15 feet for all the other structures.
Okay. Mr. Beck down there, do you have an opinion, or what do you?
I'm with you guys if we keep that 15 feet for the outbuildings.
How about for the main building, the habitable house unit?
Well, but we're 30 feet.
Okay.
I don't see any problem with that, but
Ms. Perkins?
I agree. 15 for the non-inhabitable. Keep it the same for the inhabitable, or habitable.
Mr. Savello, do you have it? You okay with
I'll
that?
go with that.
Okay, I'm personally okay with that. I think that's fair to people. Allows you to put your garden shed in the backyard and not have it, not necessarily encroach on anybody else, but it's not the same as having somebody living right up against you, so. You taking notes, or you?
I've got it right here.
I figured that.
What, on your hand?
Well, I did get some on my hand, but not from writing that.
Not from that. Okay, and then, just a quick discussion on the center line. Everybody okay with going from the center line of the road back to 75 feet?
What is it now?
It looks like it was previously center
That's-
line of the road.
That's what it is, 75 feet from the center line.
Yeah.
Currently.
Well, it
For
says
residential?
feet from the front yard property line.
That's on,
That's
550.
agriculture.
on 550.
Yeah,
On
state
state
road.
road.
On state
And it
road.
would be what would it be,
45 from the center line on collector or arterial, and then 35 from local. So to put that in perspective for you, the only, I have it written down here
That's not
somewhere.
what it says in here though, Corey.
What's that?
It doesn't say
Right.
that
That's
in
what
here.
we have right now.
Right now.
That's what we have right now.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Okay.
no.
So what
I thought
would
you were
be,
saying
what would
current.
it be under this proposal?
Would be 30 feet side and rear, and then
50 from
50
the
feet.
property line.
Yeah, that's from the property
But this is
line.
saying
If it's
property
side
line.
and rear,
So you would
50
want,
feet from the property line in the front on 550.
you would want at least 65 feet from the center
What
line.
would it be on a township road?
Township Road,
They're generally 50 feet, so it would be 25 feet plus that.
This.
25 feet from the center line to,
25 feet plus the 50 would be 75 feet from the center line on a township road.
Previously,
where you
it
can
looks
build
like
it.
it was
What?
35
Where you can
feet from
build.
count local
Anything?
roads, Corey.
Yeah.
yes.
And then on the state road, it would go, because you're going from the center line, so the road right away on most of 550 is either 33 feet or 50 feet. There's some spots where it's 60. Actually, through the middle of Stormstown, the road right away is 66 feet.
what, Stormstown, what, 550?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go over this again. Where are we at now?
Okay,
What we want to
That's
try,
what Corey-
what we want to try to do is establish a uniform thing for the zoning people where you would measure from the center line of the road back, because front property lines vary a lot.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, like in my case, I own to the center of 550. Well, that's not fair if you're saying my front property line technically going to put a house out in the road. So, you know, we just have to have a system that's compatible.
Understood. I'm just trying to see where we are now
Where we are,
with,
what we're proposing, what the
with each
proposed.
type of road.
Okay.
We have township roads and we have the state
What we
road.
currently have on the books now?
Yeah.
Okay, what we currently have on the books right now is 75 feet from State Route 550 from the center line.
Center line.
Center line of the road. On a, this is your front setbacks. On your collector and arterial, it's 45 feet.
From the center line of the road.
No, from the center line, I apologize, yeah.
To where you can build something.
Yes.
Okay.
And then for local roads, it's 35 feet from the center line. And to give you an idea of roads, obviously State Route 550s are arterial. Collectors are Smith, Marengo, and Loveville, and all others are local.
Okay. And that's for structures. For the
Well, that's for
frontage.
any type of, yeah.
Any kind of building.
Building.
Any,
Yep.
yeah.
And what's proposed now is front straight through is just 50 feet from the property line is what's proposed. On state routes, it's 75 feet from the property line, but that's like what Dave is saying to go back to where it says center line.
Instead of property line.
Yes.
Does a corner lot have two fronts?
Technically, it does. yeah.
That gets pretty confusing when we.
From a
don't-
zoning standpoint, usually you have to pick a frontage, but part of the reason why the front setbacks are probably more important than any particular setback is there's, you know, when you drive up 550 on the western end of the township, see how close the telephone poles to the road? I got a friend that hit one of those Just did a lot of damage to the car and cut the pole. They can't set those back because they'd have to get permission from all the landowners to go up through. And not that you want to have a telephone pole in your front yard necessarily, but with the way technology is advancing in this country, some super power line might go through, to get mega high-speed internet for everybody. You have to have a spot to put things. And when the buildings like in Stormstown kind of crowd the road, there's no place to go. And I'd venture that most people in this town, or in this room here, have never seen the sidewalks in Stormstown. And I can tell you they exist. They're underneath the road asphalt. And once in a while, if you dig in your front yard, if you live in the old part of town, you'll find the edges of them.
So can I ask?
But so that's why setbacks are important to allow access and utilities and road widening and culverts and all those kind of things that come into play. So
I just had another, for clarification again. Let's, for what's being proposed
Sure.
here. If we use the center line instead of the property line, what would the setback from the center line be under the new proposal?
If we use the center line, it would be 50 feet for every local and collector road, an arterial road. State route would be 75 feet from the center line, which is exactly what it is now.
Okay, so under the current ordinance, from the center line on the collector road and the local road, what is it?
Collector would be 45 currently, and the local is 35.
And so we're going from, on a local road, we're going from 35 to 50.
50.
That's another 15 feet.
But you gotta remember, people are driving past your house at 35 miles an hour, so a little buffer is a good thing, especially in the front. It's not, they're not gonna follow the speed limit, but you know how that goes.
No, they don't follow the speed limit, but I think that's probably beside the point. Again, that's another 15 feet added to setbacks on the front, on the frontage. I don't know how that affects, how many lots would be non-conforming under that rule, under that change.
Mostly just Stormstown.
Yeah, but that's zone village.
What's that?
This is just zone, we're talking about R, right?
Yeah.
That's zone village, that's different,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So Stormstown is zone village, the village.
Yep.
Okay.
Anybody
I mean, I
have any-
still would prefer that we reduce those setbacks, but because I'm more comfortable with the way they are now. I don't know how frontage, increasing that by 15 feet benefits us. I mean, some people, obviously, we're gonna disagree on that because some people think it's a benefit. I'm concerned that for some people's properties, it can make or break whether they are able to do things on their property.
Well, part
You know
of
what I
that,
mean?
part of that extra 15 feet will be used up in the road because our current is 50 feet from the front yard property line. But if you're proposing 50 from the center of the road,
Currently, it's 30,
it's 35 currently, but I'm saying, right, in the.
From the center line,
In the draft ordinance, we have a 50 from the front yard property line. But if we change that to 50 of the center line of the road,
it's still 15
that
feet
15
difference.
feet difference, a lot of that's gonna be eaten up by the road.
No, it won't. How is it?
Because it's currently,
It's currently 35 from the
so I
center
guess
line.
it's, right.
Yeah, I mean,
right,
it's definitely more
It
restrictive.
would go to
than what
50, it
it's-
would go to 50 from the
From
center
what we
line.
currently
Yes,
have.
it would be slightly,
that's-
it would be 15
Right, but I'm
feet
saying,
restricted.
right, in the
I'm
draft.
just trying to get
in the
apples to
draft,
apples
we have from the
comparison.
property line.
Sure.
So that's a little bit of a difference if we change that from property line to center of the road.
It's a 15-foot difference.
Is the reasoning from a planning standpoint, I think Dave alluded to and you said too, is just for future, so there's space for
There's space
things,
for
so that people
widening
right
roads.
up against something, or if you have to widen, then the house isn't right on. It also protects the homeowner from certain things too, because they're back a little bit.
Right. So use Smith Road for an example, because we're in the process of widening
Yeah.
Smith Road. Those setbacks and an increased setback would assist us, would
don't-
have assisted
I
us in
don't
Smith
think,
Road.
I think we still have a problem beyond our setbacks. We have other issues with Smith Road where we can't widen it. There are issues, right, Chuck? There are issues with that.
There are some issues with a full-scale widening.
Right,
yes.
right, so we have to vary the width based on limitations that we have, that we can't remove. That was my understanding.
That's more of a right-of-way issue
Right.
with the roads, and I know that, I've been working with the rest of the staff to try to make sure, moving forward, we don't have those issues, but,
But we've got
It's a
Smith
little-
Road the way it is, and we have to live with it
Prevent that.
pretty much.
In the future.
Does the board have any feelings about it, other than what we discussed? Entirely committed to keeping the numbers there to the center line, or,
I think it has to be moved to the center line and not to the property line.
okay?
That's small concession in my mind. That still adds 15 feet to the setback on the
Right.
frontage.
But 25 feet of that's gonna be state highway right away, and as much as 30 feet in this township would be state highway right away. But you're not allowed to do anything in anyways, other than pay taxes on it, so.
Well, we should get something for the tax money.
Yep. So, do we want to just keep those numbers there as the planning commission proposed, but just define it to the center line of the road?
I guess.
So hands, we're okay with that?
I'm okay as long as Corey's okay.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense to me.
Tammy, you
Yeah, I'm
okay?
good with that.
Chuck? All right. Ron, I know you'd like it to be less.
Well, am I gonna hold things up if I say I don't like it?
No, not really.
That's right, so, I mean, can I live with it? I guess, but
Okay.
as long as it goes to the center line and not the property line.
Okay. All right, now we're gonna get down to the meat and potatoes of things, I guess. This is part B. Requirements for non-commercial keeping of domestic livestock. This is a new section for the residential zone.
I have a change, but it really applies back up to A. It's not a technical thing, but it
Okay.
applies to A. Is that okay? Because I think one of the things from what I've seen missing out of A is an accessory use allowance for any size property that would allow, basically, we would add chicken hens and honeybees as accessory uses to allow both of those in a residential R1 zone regardless of the lot size. So I think that's something that's,
Chickens and bees. Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other kinds of birds?
Regardless of lot size.
regardless of lot size.
Any other birds allowed?
Okay, well, let me drop down to number 4 here so I can see what.
Those things are on for the 3+.
All right, so under number 4, it says domestic livestock permitted in the residential zones is limited to chickens, hens, turkeys, ducks, horses, ponies, sheep, and goats. And you're saying you want to do a carve-out for
Chicken hens and bees.
chickens and bees.
Chicken hens.
Chicken hens and bees.
How many?
We don't,
We don't define it
it's not
here.
defined,
Let me,
so any amount.
let me ask our planner here, because I'm sure he's got a lot more experience with this than I do. On the keeping, like, we have domestic animals,
Sure.
which I guess are dogs, cats, fish. What all sort of falls under that, and what would fall under this agro? As far, just give me an overall of like, so I know it's not, alligators and dragons and that kind of stuff.
I think we had used, sorry, too many papers in front of me. Did we have a specific list for that?
Of what?
Like definition of non-domestic keeping?
A definite.
Well, number 4 lists several, I don't know if it
Oh.
lists enough.
Oh, okay, well, yes, these are the ones that were recommended by the planning commission and staff
Okay, so
as
just,
typical domestic livestock animals.
so, under the exempted things, I mean, right now you got chicken hens, turkeys, ducks, horses, ponies, sheep,
Yep.
and goats. Keeping of domestic, what about rabbits?
They're under pets, I think.
I'm-
I'm just asking, because I don't know.
I mean, that's depending on are you using them as food, or are we using them as?
Well, I don't know.
somebody's pet?
I had a pet rabbit.
Yeah, I know, but I also know people that raise them for meat.
dinner.
Yeah, so, again, that's something that this list can be amended, or,
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's all
I'm
up
just
for
trying
you.
to get an idea, because when we turn this out to the public, I want the public, if you're gonna comment on something, I want you to comment on something we're actually going forward with, not on something that was proposed that got shot down or changed around.
Can you read the list again?
Sure. Okay, right now, in this ordinance, well, this is what's listed. Domestic livestock permitted in the residential zones is limited to chicken hens, turkeys, ducks, horses, ponies, sheep, and goats.
No cattle?
In 3+ acres. That's 3 acres. That's 3 acres.
Well, that just defines domestic livestock.
That is for 3+.
It is the 3+ acres, yes.
Correct, and then there's a different list for less than that.
Well, there isn't, it doesn't exist yet. That's what Ms. Hartle was bringing up, is making a carve out for certain things.
Can we define small animals versus large animals?
Shouldn't
Or
birds be all inclusive?
any small animal, I mean,
Pigs and up are considered large animals in the agricultural business. Pigs on up, sheep, goats, horses, miniature horses, cows, they're all considered large animals.
large animals.
And, you know, bunnies, chickens, fowl, peacocks, mink, rabbits, they're all considered small animals.
Can we have a definition of small animals versus large animals, define that, and define the options to request variances to this ordinance should someone have a need? Because there may come a time in this township, as well as any other township for that matter, where we will be forced to raise food for our own consumption because of the nature of things, the nature of the economy, the nature of things going on in the country and in the world. And I think people need to know that they can be self-sufficient when necessary. In other words, I'm not saying you just bring in the animals, you know, herd them in, 20 cows on my 1 acre, but I'm saying if I requested if there was a vehicle for a variance that said, I want to have a cow, and here's why, would there be a process where people could apply for variance to the ordinance under, a reasonable request?
With the variance, just straight across the board.
What you want to call, whatever you call it.
Yeah, I mean,
legally.
that's what, because it's in zoning, it would be a variance. Because of that, you have to be able to prove undue hardship, which maybe at that point, if what the situation you're describing, if we're in a food crisis or a food shortage.
Or you
maybe
can't eat the stuff you get at the store.
Or whatever that would be, I think there potentially would be a way to go through a variance, is that being a hardship. But if it's just because you want one, that doesn't classify as a typical, allowable reason to get a variance.
Would that be a conditional use or a special exception? Or is that not, and I'm just throwing it out there, but.
I don't know that it'd be probably a special exception.
Okay.
I mean, again, that's something we can add in.
Well, I'm not saying to add it, I'm just saying.
Yeah, I mean, it could fall
I know
on-
getting a variance, if you are dealing with zoning and you say, well, my house has got a nonconformity and I want a variance, you have to go to the zoning hearing board. And the zoning hearing board is not allowed to, you cannot create your own hardship and get it approved. That's state law. So, but a special exception is something that we could possibly come before a board or review board, supervisors, depending on how the ordinance is written, where, you've always had like 50 emus and you got 2.9 acres and you want to continue with it and you live out in the middle of nowhere, and, then the board could grant that special exception and it wouldn't be an issue. And I'm not saying that's what we're doing, I'm just saying that's a possibility.
I think there should always be a vehicle in case there's a need in the future. I mean, there could be a need, and I'm serious about this. There could be a need for someone to
I don't
have.
have an issue with the bees because I got hornets and I'd rather have the bees.
Are they domestic?
No.
And bees
No,
serve
they
a
got
lot-
there naturally.
Bees serve a multitude of purposes in terms of pollination. They're essential. So, and I applaud people that raise them because I couldn't do it, but I'm glad there's people that do it.
Okay, so Ms. Hartle brought up about cutout for chicken hens and bees, and I said rabbits.
I think we should
and I
define
think
it small animals.
Your
Dave.
suggestion of small animals might be most appropriate. And I'll throw that out to the public here when we get to that point, but I'm just trying to get a feeling for how the board feels about that. Patty, do you want to comment on that one way or the other, or do you feel that's outside the bounds, or?
Well, no, that, I mean, rabbits is fine, that's one of those that could be on the borderline, you know, between pet or commercial raising, so that's fine. But we're not talking like dogs and cats, those aren't domestic
No.
livestock for sure. We're
These
just
these are,
talking-
these are things that sort of
could
fall
be
out the
potential.
outside of the normal house pet.
Right.
Pat, or Tammy or Chuck, you got any feelings on the subject? Good, bad, or ugly? I'm not trying to draw it out, I'm just trying to get a consensus from the board. So what you see or what you like or what you don't like. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with going with the small animals. I mean, I definitely think chicken, hens, and bees should be allowed without restrictions. So I'm okay going with the small animal
Right,
route.
because that definition does not exist in the current draft.
Right, we have to create that definition of
Right.
what includes small animals, yes.
Chuck, you got anything to add to that, or
No,
feel comfortable or
I'm-
not comfortable, or?
No, just trying to pay
We-
attention to what we're doing. So we added to number 4. Right.
We're gonna redefine, we're gonna define small animals as a definition.
And I guess an exemption
To be
for
on any
small
size lot.
animals, without lot restrictions.
Okay, so we waived we put chickens and bees, which would be small, and rabbits. Yeah.
I can't think of anything else somebody would normally have.
Ducks.
Ducks. What is it?
That would be included if we went to the small animal route, the
Yeah.
definition, right?
Yeah.
Roosters.
Well, that would be small animals if we decide to do that.
Chicken hens, you're saying chicken
All
hens.
right. Ron?
'Cause the
I'm
noise-
surprised to hear that R1 ended up having less restrictions for the keeping of non-commercial domestic livestock than ag. Because when the rezoning was done, I remember that, I went to the public hearings. And the one thing that was said throughout those public hearings by the COG at the time was that there was no real difference between R1 and A1. That being said, and that was something that was repeated many times, I'm surprised to hear that the R1 restrictions were less than A1. And I do remember discussion about allowing one large animal on a 1 acre lot. You know, you couldn't have 2 or 3, you could have 1. And they were discussing limitations at that time, which I thought, well, if there's no difference no restrictions with R1 as opposed to A1, why would you even rezone if there's no difference? I kept
Lot
asking that
size.
question over and over again in the public hearing when the zoning was being
Dave said lot size.
discussed.
Lot size. Agriculture, generally 10 acres.
Dave, they didn't talk about it.
Well, I'm not saying they did talk about it, I'm just saying that's why it's generally done.
But there were people, I remember specifically on Loveville Road at the time, who had large lots, and they all got together, wrote a letter to the township asking to be exempted from R1 rezoning, and they were exempted. That's arbitrary. And arbitrariness is a problem for me, because we sit around and we talk about how many animals, 3, 6, 9, turkeys, chickens,
Yep.
rabbits, whatever. It's all arbitrary. And, I don't understand why we're going through this process to redefine all this.
Well,
However,
because it's here, because we gotta discuss it now,
well,
so.
but if we can get to the point where we can describe 2 types of animals, large and small, I think that's making great progress. Okay, so I think we need to consider that as in addition to some of these other restrictions. So it's just a point I wanted to make about a little more flexibility and the opportunity to file a request of variance or something if there's a compelling reason for a variance. Some way to address a need should it arise.
Well, if we went with the large, small animal definition, then there would be no variance actually, it's not a special exception, because you can't do it.
Or special exception. That's another
There'd
vehicle.
be no reason to do that, if you had large and small animal definition there. Let's hit the other 4 items here. Number 2, it says fenced area shall be 1 acre minimum for the first 2 animal equivalent units. Now, animal equivalent unit is in here is 1,000-pound live weight of domestic livestock. So this is where you're talking about the bigger critters, as they say.
This also is, you're talking about the minimum lot size of 3 acres. All this refers to a 3-acre minimum lot size, the rest of these.
Yes.
So it says fenced area shall be 1 acre minimum for the first 2 animal equivalent units, and 1 acre of the additional fenced area is required for each additional AEU, animal equivalent unit. The fenced area shall exclude the homestead, septic area, wells, driveways, impervious surface, and the forest. The fence shall be 30 feet from the side and rear property lines and 50 feet from the front property line. So in this proposal that was given to us, they're talking about a setback from the fence to in this case, it would be the neighbor's property line to keep the animals back. These are large animals. These are cows, they're horses, the large domestic animals. I know we had buffalo in the township at one time, but probably not a good idea in a residential neighborhood. Let me just jump down through all these here. It says animal equivalent units is 1,000 pounds live weight of domestic livestock, regardless of the actual number of individual animals comprising the unit. No more than 8 animals shall be permitted on a lot, regardless of size, weight, and species. Calculation of the AEU must be consistent with Pennsylvania Nutrient Management Act 25, Code Chapter 83, 83.262. Number 4, it says domestic livestock permitted in residential zones is limited to chickens, turkeys, ducks, horses, ponies, sheep, and goats. The keeping of domestic animals for commercial purposes is prohibited. That means if you want to eat your own horse, I guess have at it, but you're not going to sell it to the neighbors for food. The storage of animal waste shall be at a minimum of 100 feet from all property lines, wetlands, and waterways. Storage of manure shall not exceed 60 days and shall not exceed 30 days from May 11th to September 30th. Reference a manure management plan acceptable by statutes and regulations. And that's all that this ordinance says. So now we as a board consider, and go ahead, Dan.
Would you want to consider changes to any of these 5?
Well, that's what I'm kicking out here just for discussion purposes.
Okay, well, in terms of animal waste, that I would like to
Is
propose.
there any way you could put these on the screen so we can see them?
Do you have an electronic copy of that or not?
That's a link, isn't it?
I'm sorry, we don't have that electronic thing at this point, but
It hasn't been reviewed by the board yet.
when we get the supervisors here, wrestle this out, and then we'll go back and get public comment on it so we can see where we're going. Go ahead, Tammy.
So in terms of the animal waste number 5, I think we should add some of that wording that protects our wetlands, waterways, wells, so on and so forth. And also in terms of the manure storage, that if we follow the Pennsylvania DEP guidelines, rather than the specifics that we have stated here.
It just says reference manure management plan applicable by statute and regulations.
Is that
Yeah,
state?
But we have storage of, storage timelines of 30 and 60 days. So if we follow, instead of that, if we follow the Pennsylvania DEP guidelines.
Yeah, I think it was pointed out to us that we were actually more restrictive,
Yeah.
that this was more restrictive than.
Because of the 60-day 30 and 60-day requirement, so.
And this came.
Came back as a comment from the county.
Okay.
Why don't we let it with the state?
That's what we're, yeah,
That's
we're
what I'm
removing that.
proposing.
That's what
That's
she's
what I'm
proposing to do.
Is to follow, yeah, so we put in some protection for wetlands, waterways, public, private drinking waters, sinkholes, swales, ditches, gullies, and then also our storage manure actually should follow the Pennsylvania DEP guidelines. So those are some things that I propose. So basically, we're adding a sentence in there and then taking out and replacing that storage sentence with DEP guidelines.
I got a question. How are any of these requirements, including minimum lot size, impacted by state requirements? What does the state say property owners are allowed to do?
I mean, the township can limit uses on lot sizes. I don't know that the state has right to farm, but that's for commercial farm. I mean, they do setbacks for wells and things like that, like that we have incorporated in here, but they don't have anything directly specific to the keeping of domestic livestock.
And these regulations we're talking about here about the storage of animal waste, we're not talking about a rabbit cage, we're talking
No,
about
this is like a large scale
Yeah.
waste facility.
pile of manure,
Yes.
20 feet high and 30 feet across.
But this does apply to a 3-acre lot, 3-acre residential lot.
Yes.
Yes.
And the keeping of a non-commercial livestock.
Right, because they have to manage the manure.
Right.
Because that's a requirement.
And there are properties in this township that aren't necessarily, because of their shape, don't necessarily have a space where you can have a setback of 100 feet. Okay, isn't that what we're talking about, 100 feet from property, from all property lines? Wetlands and waterways. Now, wetlands and waterways is one thing, but property lines is, again, it's 100 feet away from any property line.
That's a state regulation as well.
That is a state
That's
regulation?
the manure management plan.
Are you sure?
That's the way that it was written.
I got a gentleman shaking his head back there. I'm not really gonna take public comment, but if you know for sure,
Yep.
would you enlighten us?
In Title 25, there's no setbacks for property, and that's under the manure management. And Article 38 is nutrient management. There's no setbacks for property lines for that either.
For manure storage.
For manure storage. And now there's setbacks for the wetlands like you're talking about.
There are setbacks for that.
Absolutely. We need to protect our waterways and our water, but nothing for property lines.
All right, well, I would recommend that maybe staff take a look at that.
Sure.
And see what's going on. We wanna do it right if we're gonna do it. We need to be consistent.
We could just refer to 38 and 25 instead of listing.
I know
all of
Mr.
it, in
Roll's
case it
writing that
changes.
down.
Yep.
so.
Yeah, I'd like to see the exact language on that before we do anything.
Yeah.
All right, and I understand why you don't wanna have a bunch of manure sitting around in a pile all summer. Number 4 here, it's domestic livestock permitted in residential zones limited to chickens, turkeys, ducks, horses, ponies, sheep, and goats. Does anybody want to change that to large and small, or do we want to you want to keep that definition there and leave the cows out of it?
Well, what about if somebody wants emus or somebody wants llamas? I mean, we have a llama farm in Halfmoon Township. Hey.
I don't know if they're still there or not, but we did.
Yeah, they're still there.
Yeah, they've been there a long time.
But there are other animals that we may have not have considered, but
Well, let's get a feeling from the board how people feel about that. You want to go first, or, I don't want to put you in the spot.
I'm fine with adding a definition for some small animals, but I think the larger animals that we have defined for domestic livestock are pretty good.
Okay, so you're comfortable with the current definition for the larger animals, the horses, the ponies, the sheep, and the goats?
if we have recourse, in other words, if someone, again, can apply for a different kind of large animal that people raise for various reasons, including llamas and other things, they could at least make application for that, a special exception, for example.
For free?
Hmm?
For free? Because there's gonna be a fee.
There's always a fee. It's government.
That's what I'm saying.
I have a technical question, and maybe Corey can separate this for me. If I live in a residential zone and I have 11 acres,
Yes.
where do I fall under this category?
You can do a commercial ag, or you could do keeping of domestic livestock.
So you could drop into commercial and do the cows if you have 10 acres or more?
If you've 10 acres or more.
Okay. That's what I'm trying to figure out here. What's the breaking point?
Because we kept that the same as we did with the ag district. That falls under right to farm, which is the 10 acres,
Yep.
or $10,000 gross
Okay.
income.
I still think we could reduce the minimum lot size, but also limit the number of animals on that lot. We can do it by lot size too. I just want to make that, I still have heartburn with a 3-acre minimum lot size for keeping of non-commercial, domestic livestock. With
Even with the
provisions for minimum or maximum number of animals. You know, we don't want 8 cows on 1 acre. Like it caused problems before, or however many there were that time, but
Okay, so even with the cutout, you want
I would prefer 1 acre.
1 acre. So let me back up.
But we
here.
limit the number of large animals on that 1 acre.
Where are you talking about, Ron? 1
Back
acre?
on the 3-acre minimum lot size, I would go back to 1 acre, but I would limit the number of large animals maybe to 1, but not limit the number of small animals.
But wouldn't
That
they
would be-
automatically be excluded because we're looking for a 1 acre minimum fenced area? So if it's a 1 acre lot size, you've also got a house, you know, on that property, which you have to back out. So there's not enough space on 1 acre property to fence for, say, a large animal.
You need 2 pygmy goats, you can't have 1.
I think we're getting,
We're getting into the weeds,
we're
I
diverging
understand
here,
that.
and we gotta pull back the focus on this thing.
But I think
We're gonna have a group that basically says the small animals will be permitted without exception, without rules, basically. So if you wanna have your duck, your chicken, your bees, if you have an acre, there's no fencing with bees, obviously. Rabbits are not gonna be fenced in the entire property.
But you gotta fence in animals to protect them.
Well, right,
It's-
but
it's- it's
usually those
requi-
smaller
it's
animals go
essential.
into some kind of caged area.
Or you'll have a
something
bunch
like
of dead
that.
small animals
So,
around here.
the numbers here that we have in the fenced area under number 2, that would only apply to the larger animals that you'd have to fence in anyway.
Right, we're gonna have to adjust that. So if we have a definition for small animals, we need to have a separate entity for fenced area for small animals, which differs from fenced area for large animals.
Yeah,
Right.
Right? Yeah.
and here again, that fenced area does not apply to commercial ag operations, correct?
Yes, this is all just
This
for
is all
domestic.
domestic.
Just domestic.
Everything under that is domestic.
Okay.
I think it was cod.
Does the Board of Supervisors have anything else they feel that they need to add, take away, modify, flesh it?
I think I'm sort of hung up on this 30 foot.
Actually, I was just looking at that, Chuck.
On,
the side,
which
the side
part?
par-
On
side
number
fencing.
2 here, for
Yeah.
30 foot back from the sides and the rear and
For the
50 from the
fencing?
front. Yeah.
So what if, well, I was thinking about that too. What if we use our same setbacks as we do for non-inhabited buildings, the same as for the fence? So if we could drop that to 15
Yeah.
instead of the 30 and the 50
I was gonna say
That's
10.
a lot of wasted space.
It is.
for fenced area.
And there,
that
and there
could use-
again, why even 15?
I don't want it right on the line.
Well, I think they're thinking fencing, like if there's an electrified fence and you've got a property next door that has young children, at least you've got a 15-foot buffer by the time that individual crosses. I don't know.
Hey, they'll learn to
I'm just
respect electricity.
Well, that's true. I learned that way, yeah. I don't disagree. But, yeah, I mean, if you're looking, yeah, I mean, I think the fencing setbacks could definitely be reduced. And
That's
I'd
a lot
be,
of wasted.
Because they're not
ground.
permanent structures either. They're not
Yeah.
permanent.
yeah, and I'd be fine, you know, dropping that at least to, you know, no more than 15 feet for sure. You know, but I'm, you know, I don't know if you had an idea.
It seems
of-
like our general setback is at 15 feet.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that for the non-inhabited properties, non-inhabited
To
buildings,
avoid the
we've
very
got
same
15
kind of
feet.
problem we could have when somebody doesn't like that being, you know, let's say you know, there's no setback. someone's gonna have a problem with that. But I understand what you're saying, Chuck. With fencing, it's not a permanent structure. And there, but having some setback, I think, makes sense.
Well, if you have 5 or 6 acres of ground and you take 15 feet of that the whole way around, that's a lot of ground.
It is.
Now you got weeds and whatnot growing between that, so, and I'm not saying put it right on the property line, a couple feet in or whatever, because there again, that's a waste if you're pasturing something.
Yeah,
And a kid,
My concern is more on the large animals, that if you live next to it, and let's just say you want to fence your kids out from sticking their arm through there and getting their hand bit off by the Tasmanian devil or whatever's over on the other side, it ought to be at least enough that it's outside of reach. You can push a lawnmower down along the edge of it or something like
right,
that.
but that's a couple feet, not
Right.
15 or 30.
That's what I said, 10, 6,
5 feet, 10
5.
feet?
I think if we're going to have setbacks here again, we have setbacks for residential
But
properties,
it's not a building, it's just a fence.
but
Three in Pittsburgh.
3?
I think it was small lots.
3 feet, is that what you're saying, 3 feet? Well, I think we got a whole bunch of numbers here, but
Well, let's see if the board can lock it down here a little bit.
How about 10?
Patty says 10. Ron, do you got a number in mind?
well, I think it would probably, if I were to guess, it'd be 5 feet.
I got a 10 and a 5. Ms. Perkins?
I mean,
I'm undecided on that one.
but we have we're talking about setbacks for
For the
fences.
fence.
Yeah, I know,
For the fence.
It's not a permanent
Right,
structure.
right,
If
right.
it became a problem,
Yeah.
if there was a problem, that fence can be moved if it were a significant problem, but it's not a permanent structure, so as far as I'm concerned, it'd be 5 feet.
Can I make a suggestion? What about having the setback be the starting point of the fence from the nearest inhabited building, neighbor-wise? If you got a neighbor, you're gonna start your fencing 75 or 100 feet from the nearest building at your property line, and you can use all the property beyond that you want. Put it on the property line. And then you're protecting the distance from where your animals can get to the nearest inhabitable building. And the rest of your property is yours to use, because you're talking about a minimum of an acre here. That's a lot of ground.
Right.
And if you start that point, the corner of that fence, 75 feet or 100 feet from your neighbor's house or garage, and go back, you can use all your property.
Right. Well, and if we,
And not have side and rear setbacks on empty vacant land that is yours to use as you please.
yeah,
But then it protects your neighbor from any encroaching from your animals.
the only problem that I can see with having it on the property line is if you have two neighboring properties that fence, then you've got two fences on the property line, which could be a problem from an electrified standpoint, from fencing. Whereas if there's a 5-foot
Again-
setback on either one,
We're talking residential zone.
right, but if you're housing and fencing for large animals, you're gonna want that electrified. And so if you've got two neighboring properties that wanna put up electric fence for large animals and they electrify it, you've got two fences basically
on the
back
property
to
line.
back, which could be an issue from an electrical standpoint. So
Yeah.
so
And
there
a
should
point
be.
of contention too.
Yeah, that could be a big issue. So there, from that standpoint, there probably should be some kind of a setback just to separate electrical.
I hear a 5 out of Ms. Hartle.
The point is and the point of all this is to allow property owners the maximum use of their property, because they pay for every square foot of that property, and they pay taxes every year for every square foot of that property.
While still being good neighbors.
Well, that's,
Right, but I mean, we have,
goes beyond
even
any kind
homes
of
have
code or
setbacks, so, and you still have to pay property taxes, so, where you can't build your home, but
Yeah.
I'm good
That's
with
right.
5, Dave.
Gonna do 5. I can hang with 5. In a residential zone, as far as farmers are
Five.
concerned, it's 0, but
Is that the side? That's just the side.
Be side or rear or whatever it is.
Well, there's two in here. There's,
Yeah, well, right now, there's a rear, I don't know why the rear setback's always held in high esteem compared to the side.
Well, I don't know why they
There's
went
nothing
30.
in the back except somebody else's back.
so we making both of those?
Just make them both 5.
What do they-
And this is just trying to get a consensus out of the board.
You know what they say, fences make good neighbors.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that a lot in my profession.
We're barbecue neighbors, aren't we? So we're going with 5?
I guess we're gonna go with 5, theoretically anyways. So, I don't see anything else here that, at least from the Board of Supervisors standpoint, unless the board members wanna add something or take something away. So I guess we could just do a rundown of where we're at this point. The first part of the ordinance, pretty standard stuff, talking about a change to residential housing setback of 30 feet, 15 feet for accessory structures that are non-occupied, which is really not that big a change. Defining the front setback as coming from the center line of the road instead of coming from the front property line, which could be anywhere. I don't think anybody disagrees that you have to keep your livestock fenced in or under control. Just not good. Let them out and run around the neighborhood. And then we're talking about doing a fenced area with a setback of 5 feet with the adjoining property. So you gotta have your animals fenced back at least 5 feet from the property line. The animal equivalent unit is 1,000 pounds of live weight. We're talking about exempting small animals potentially, particularly chickens, turkeys, ducks, and bees, and whatever else that's small stuff. Then separating out the large stuff, the horses. I didn't know if we were adding cows or we're not adding cows, or we can consider it later.
Yeah, we have to define both those categories.
Yep. And then coming back on animal waste, need to keep it back from the wells, and we're taking a look at the state statutes,
DEP guidelines.
DEP guidelines. I'm not sure DEP, Department of Agriculture, all those.
It's the,
DEP.
Waterways is DEP.
Yep,
it's 25, nutrient management stuff.
yep. So we just want to protect the groundwater and the drinking water. I know many people are on Upper Half Moon Water Company, and some people are drinking the well out of the ground. We really don't want to have issues with the water supply out here. We have a very good water supply. I'd like to keep it that way. Were you gonna say something, Barry?
I think
Seems
the
like there's
big-
enough there for another revision.
Yep.
I think the vehicle, Dave, for.
What's that?
The vehicle to allow people to request through special exception or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
I have that, I have that written down.
Yeah, I figure he's got all the notes,
Okay.
all the good notes.
Because I think that helps to address increasing the minimum lot size to 3 acres if people can, first of all, have small animals
Yeah.
without limit. I don't know, provide they're under control, because that's still gotta be a requirement no matter
That's
what.
requirement. It has to
Yeah,
be,
well, we
But-
talked about putting a fencing
But
requirement
could
in there for
request
small
a
animals.
large animal for a particular reason.
Yep.
Through special exception or whatever you wanna call it.
One of them genetically modified wolves I just saw on the internet.
I don't want those around.
Anyways, if the board's done, I was gonna open it up for the public to kind of talk about it
Please.
and express your concerns. And I know there's a lot of people here tonight, and I know there's, my phone blew up before the meeting, so I know there's a lot of opinion, for and against. I don't know if anybody from the planning commission wants to stand up and say anything, or they want to just stay quiet, or anything, but I will give them an opportunity to just kind of, if they want to add something. If they don't, then I'm gonna go to citizens, and it'll be an orderly thing, and whoever wants to talk can come up here and sit in a chair, give their name, and say, this is not testimony for adoption, this is just so that we, the elected officials, can get the public's opinion on what we've got here, because it's obviously very different from what it started out with. So,
Dave, open it up to the public, the planning commission.
okay, you did your work and And it's gonna come back to you guys to take a look at anyways. Obviously, when it's corrected. We just wanna make sure all our i's are dotted and t's are crossed. So, who from the public would like to come up and say something? We'll start with Michelle. Gonna do left or right, so.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Shelberg, and I'm a resident of Halfmoon Township. I'm here to voice strong opposition to any township regulation that limits the rights of private citizens to farm on their own land, including proposals to cap the number of animals we're allowed to raise. Let me be very clear. This land was fought for. We're not surrendering it to paper tyrants. Our ancestors built this country from the ground up, with their hands in the soil, feeding their families, their communities, and this nation. They didn't do it with permission slips from bureaucrats. They didn't need zoning officials to tell them how many chickens they could own or how many cows were acceptable. They did it because it was their land, and it still is. What's happening here is a slow motion land grab. You may not be sending bulldozers, but you're using pens and policies to take from us just the same, robbing us of our freedom to live off the land, to feed ourselves, to teach our children responsibility, self-reliance, and the values this country was founded on. This isn't about nuisance control or community standards. It's about control, plain and simple. And we're not going to stand for it. I don't care what the justification is. The township does not have the authority to override the Constitution, to trample the Right to Farm Act, it's not just about commercial properties, or to decide what happens in my barn, in my pasture, or in my coop. This is rural America, not a township dictatorship. And if you try to make it one, you're going to face resistance, organized, vocal, and unwavering. We are not radicals. We are neighbors. We are families. We are farmers, whether you have 1 acre or you have 100 acres. And we will not let elected officials or misguided boards strip us of our rights. So I'll end with this: back off our property, back off our livestock, and if you don't like living next to a farm, move to Patton.
Who's next? Coming around from left to right? Yes, sir.
My name's Tom Majeski, live on Cornfield Lane. Ditto what Michelle said. She kind of said it better than I ever could. I'd like to know who came up with this plan and why. Was it just, it seems like an excuse for more rules that don't have to be made. Was it the planning? Because we asked a few people, they said it was planning commission. Planning commission said no, it was supervisors. Who was it?
Over the course of 8 months, we've been asked by the board at a meeting to look into this, which we did. Planning commission made recommendations, and again, they didn't agree to it at that point.
Was this all triggered by complaints, or was
There
this
have been
doing somebody a
complaints
favor?
I've only been here about a year now, so I can't specifically say a ton of complaints, but I know there are complaints that have come in.
Okay.
I want to just also address, in most municipalities, the ordinances are not fixed. They do change from time to time, and I will say that I did ask staff, which is our planner and everybody, to look into making revisions to some of these ordinances. Some of the revisions are popular, like getting rid of the sprinklers. Obviously, our road standards change as the state changes them, and I think, I'm not trying to say it's good or bad, I'm just saying that as you get down through, you see things that because when you work here, you see things that may be a problem or are a problem, and then you're saying, okay, well, what do we do to fix that? And I'm not saying I'm in favor or I'm against. What I'm just saying is, we're running down through a lot of ordinances, and this is one that rolled up. And I'm not gonna say it's anybody's fault, but I know what it's like to sit back in that office and field the telephone calls. When somebody does something that is not popular with their neighbors, you know, I feel for Amy, because I know what it's like to sit in that seat and hear the grief. So, you know, the planning commission's worked hard to come up with something that they thought would be helpful in this manner. If it had been me, I might approach it a little bit differently. But, you know, that organization, our planning commission, has worked hard to present an ordinance to the board that they thought would better the township. So I'm gonna sit here and put blame on anybody, because, you know, anybody that doesn't come to the
It just
meetings,
seemed to
they
come
have the
out of-
blame, supervisors have the
It
blame.
came from out of nowhere, and everybody's going, well, who came up
Well,
with this?
I'm not gonna say pointing fingers, because staff was directed to revise the ordinances down through. But, yes, Ron.
Point of order. We did not, as a board, sit here in public meeting and vote as a board to direct the staff to initiate a change in this ordinance. I know at one point the staff were working on it, the planning commission was working on it. We attended a planning commission meeting where we had a discussion, and all those things. But when it comes to directing activities, we did not, as a board, vote to initiate this action. I want to be very clear about that. I understand what you're saying, okay? And there may have been discussions between individual board members and the staff and the planning commission, but that does not constitute a public meeting where we vote to initiate an action. That did not occur. I just want to be very clear about that. At least, if it did, I wasn't here, and I can count on one hand how many meetings I've missed due to
That is true.
surgeries.
We did not vote to initiate the action, but like
I just want to be very clear about
from
that.
time to time, revisions are done, staff is asked to review and clear out things that are a problem or fix things that are a problem.
Okay, I won't.
So, I don't want to sit here and point fingers at
Okay,
people,
next
because it's
question
really
is-
hard to be a member of these boards.
My next question is the setbacks.
Yeah.
A neighbor and myself have sheds on property lines.
Okay.
If these sheds fall down and have to be replaced, can they be on the property lines again, or they?
You have the right to replace it on the exact same spot with the
Okay.
same size structure.
Okay,
It's grandfathered. If a tree falls on it, you got the right to replace it.
okay. And
If you pull it out of there and say, well, you know,
okay, what if the
it's
shed's
5 years
gone for
later,
6 months?
it can't come back.
What if I have no shed for 6 months or a year? Can I put it back in?
Well, what was the
The
definition?
non-conforming use is 1 year.
1 year.
I want to thank Ron Cervello for asking questions and asking for clarity on every point to make things clear for this, because it just seems everybody else is going to rubber stamp it and go along with whatever was pushed, so, thank you, Ron.
Thank you. In the back.
Over here, David.
Oh, well, we'll jump back. You're next.
My name is Casey Burke. I live on Halfmoon Valley Road. Technically, I'm in the village, but I'm zone ag because my husband and I have a farm. So I've lived here since 1989. I'm 41 years old, so that tells you how long. R1 came into fruition in 2006. I don't know when all these rules are written, but number one is statement of intent. Continue to provide for personal agriculture and horticultural pursuits. I'm just giving a little stuff I found. And then in 2018, a small plan area was planned for sawmill and grazed woods, that development that they want to do. Future development plans should reflect the rural characters. Number B is small neighborhood compatible agriculture uses. And also I think it's every 20 years, the comprehensive plan, is that when it is? 10. So right now we're in the first step, which is survey. So they send it out to everyone in the center region. 7% was Halfmoon Township respondents. Do you feel the need for the following types of land use within 1 mile of your residence? Tied was open space, 26%, and also 26% for agriculture and farm, including small-scale agribusinesses. So that's what's important to send to people that live in this township who answer that survey. So it doesn't include large farms like we do. We farm 400 acres. It also includes the kids on Ira selling vegetables. My concern is, 20 years ago, R1 was developed. So here we are, not even 20 years later, changing this. So where in 20 years are we going to be?
The date you give is, I think, the date of the codified document. The R1 ordinance actually went in back in the 90s. And then,
That's all I could find on the website.
well, I know, and that's how municipal government works sometimes. It's a convoluted mess. But I know because I was here as a manager when the R1 was created. So that was back in the 90s. And
Well, on the zoning map, it was listed as 2008.
yeah,
It was
I
adopted
know that
later
date's
than
not
that,
right.
Dave.
because I didn't work here after 2002.
Well, I'm just saying what the zoning map said,
Yeah.
R1 to R, to A1 to
Yeah, that was
R2,
later than
R1.
the 90s when it was adopted.
Well, your point's valid, I'm just
We need
trying
to confirm the
clarify.
date.
So,
Okay, well, 30 years.
yes, sir.
You'll excuse me if I don't sit down, I may never get back.
You can stand up.
I'm Tom Lewis, I live on Cornfield Lane. My wife and I used to live in Tough Trees. We sold and moved out here because of rules similar to what we're talking about. We had a tree grew up in our house, by our house. Unknown to us, we cut the tree down. We were threatened with fines because we cut down a tree in our own house, in our own yard. Fine. Subsequent to that, we decided we wanted to do some landscaping. We were told we couldn't do landscaping. We had to get permission to put in bushes. Not only did we have to get permission to put in bushes, but you had to get approval for each type of bush. You had to have permission to plant this bush here. You couldn't put it over there, it had to be here. It sounds to me like we're headed in that direction in this township, and I do not appreciate it. I don't want to live in the equivalent of that. I won't say the words that I'm thinking. I don't want to be told what to do with my property. I want to live in what I moved out here to live with. I bought an acre. I expect to be able to do with my acre what I want to do with my acre. I don't plan to raise cattle. I don't plan to have a chicken farm. I don't plan to have a goat farm. I plan to have an acre that my wife and I can live free on and do with what we want to do. You're welcome to drive by my house. My wife works very hard to keep the lot beautiful. You can ask all my neighbors. I think we take very good care of our lot. That's all I've got to say.
Who's next? Anybody? Anyone? We'll get over to the right-hand side here eventually. Yeah, come on up.
Hi, my name is Doreen Urich, and I live on Lutz. I'll keep it brief. I moved here a couple of years ago, and my family lives in Bollesburg. That would be a great place for me to raise my kids, but I didn't like their chicken rules and all the different rules when it came to choosing my house, so I decided to move out here. I love it out here. My 6-year-old and my 9-year-old sell eggs. It's just a really good place to raise a family. I'd like to keep it as free as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, you're up. Finally.
I have to say, this is a little intimidating. I kind of feel like I'm at a congressional hearing or something.
That's just so you can be,
No, I know.
heard by the public.
So I didn't really prepare. I was just taking notes during, but as with our last speaker, about 5 years ago, my family and I lived in College Township, and at that time, my daughter was told she couldn't have chickens, and over the course of that next year, we were in kind of a big to-do with that, and it wasn't looking like it was going to be in our favor, so we called around to the various municipalities and found out that Halfmoon was the township that had the least amount of restrictions and would suit, a good place for our chickens still. And we made very sure to confirm that with the township, and if I recall, the response that we got from asking if animals were allowed was that as long as you take care of those animals in the proper way, you could basically have whatever you want. So we thought that was fair. And I just said to my neighbor I was sitting next to, the logo for this township is literally a barn with some animals, you know, and the fact that I just think it's a really slippery slope to add more zoning. Instead of making R1 more restrictive, why aren't we making A1 less restrictive to accommodate the concerns we have? You know, in the last township, there was a fight about having a garden in our front yard, and I can't imagine, you know, I don't know where things might go. You know, I'm worried about, I started a flower stand last year, you know, am I gonna have to like push that back? You know, back in the time of the Depression, Victory Gardens were a very, something that was promoted, you know, having gardens to help sustain you and your family, having chicken, they paid people to have chickens. So, yes, there are gonna be complaints occasionally, but I think it's our duty to try to settle those things, you know, have civil discourse, try to work those out before we just pile on all these restrictions. You know, trust people be conscientious, which I think the majority of people are, and that's why a lot of people are in this township. So I appreciate you know, the fact that we're trying to have native plants, that, you know, we have people who have beehives trying to, you know, that's such an important part of food production, and the bees, you know, the populations are dying, and so it's important for us to support those kind of efforts and not add on more restrictions. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else that I forgot?
Hi, John Maitland, resident of Halfmoon Township. I live out on Wynstep Drive. So I think a lot of good points that have been made thus far as the where there doesn't appear to be a need or a driver for this. And I was kind of beside myself trying to figure out really what was the stimulus for this, because it still doesn't appear that that's clear. And some of the different things that were said, it really doesn't seem like there's a lot of depth or substance in the basis of us being in a position to move forward with something like this, to impose additional restrictions on tax-paying citizens that are really trying to utilize the property that they pay the taxes for. And it was said earlier that it was 85% of the taxes are paid by R1 right now. So you're putting all the pressure down on R1 to say, and I know it's up in the air right now on whether or not that 3-acre limitation is going to go away and how that looks. So I think that's one of the bigger things. There's a lot of properties that are under 3 acres. One of the things that I brought with me was, just for an example, and you talk about looking at other townships, other municipalities, and what they do, and getting kind of in line with them. I encourage you to look at the city of Pittsburgh and see exactly what they allow for animals within the city of Pittsburgh. If you look on 1 acre of land, you can have up to 48 chickens, 43 beehives, 48 ducks, and 8 goats. So I know there's some in this room that would cringe, and it may be some of the more valid reasons, at least in their minds, in their opinions, on why this is happening and why this is being pushed forward. But this is directly impacting a huge portion of the township in a way that's not beneficial. It doesn't allow for us to get the best use of our property while being responsible with that use to not impact our neighbors. So I think we need to take a step back from this process, really evaluate all the key pieces that we're looking at with regards to this potential change in ordinance. And I think it's okay to look at things and figure out if there's a problem, how do we address that problem? Are there existing tools that are out there and available for things? Like a lot of these different things from a nuisance standpoint, it's not just the township. There's also state tools that can be used for that. I deal with a lot of these people on a day-to-day basis, and you can leverage the tools that are within the state. within the DEP, sometimes the DCNR, Department of Ag. There's a lot of different resources that can be utilized to address some of the needs and some of the things if things are perceived as a nuisance. But the way to not do that, at least from my opinion, and this, you can take it as my opinion, you don't infringe on what, in the city of Pittsburgh, they actually pointed out that straight through R1D, R1A, R2, R3, RM, NDI, GI, UI, PO, and H zoning is all permitted by right. So they're allowed this. I mean, this is this is a right of everybody that lives in the city of Pittsburgh. And this was a very thoughtful process that was done. It was done with extensive resources of University of Pittsburgh, Institute of Politics, Allegheny Conservation District, Grow Pittsburgh, Allegheny Land Trust. So instead of 3 to 5 people sitting in a room that really all didn't agree, and that came out earlier, you had a very extensive group of highly qualified individuals that went to great depths to ensure that something like this was possible. Now, do you think that there's really going to be 48 chickens on an acre in Pittsburgh?
I'm sure somebody will figure it out.
Somebody may figure it out, but there's other tools if it becomes a problem. And by putting roll and layer and layer and layer after layer, all it does is, it puts neighbor against neighbor. I mean, there's a lot of people that, it's not just unhappy, it's angry. Because you're talking about everybody's everyday finances. And there's a lot of money that has been put into this township by people moving into here. And real estate is not cheap. And
I
for
know,
those-
I have some.
Yeah. And for those that say, well, why don't you just go somewhere else? That's one of the reasons why I came here. I mean, this is as urban as I ever wanted to be, and it's rural. And I don't want to go any more urban, but to buy something more rural right now, it's just not a possibility for most people.
Not in the center region, no.
Not in the center region, even outside of the center region, it's tough.
Yep.
So.
Can you supply a copy of that to our planner? If you
It
have an extra?
also, they have a whole workup on the.
Yeah, whatever you got,
on the
if you got,
agriculture.
or if you don't have an extra copy, we can make one or something.
Yep, nope, I can supply that. But, no, outside of that, I mean, I have honeybees. And that, one of the things that was mentioned was anybody who's on R1 cannot sell anything. That I find completely ridiculous. I don't see a basis of that anywhere that would be protective. I heard we need to protect our township and protect the people within our township. I don't understand how that's going to be a protection by limiting the ability of best use of the property and also outputs from the property to help our neighbors, help our local community, to be able to grow, be healthier. I mean, there's things that do cover those items from a health standard to make sure that things are done in a way that aren't going to impact somebody adversely from a health standpoint. So it doesn't make sense just to plow forward and say, you shall not do.
Well,
We
that's
need to
why we're
figure
having
out-
this discussion
Yeah.
tonight as a board, and we've asked, you to come in and comment on it, because the board wants to know what the public thinks. But this is the first that some of us have had, because we've taken no physical action on anything yet. We're just having a discussion to see what's acceptable, if anything. And I personally see this as 2 parts. The first part being the building setbacks, the correcting the definition of the center line of the road for the front setback, instead of having an arbitrary thing. Your lots, maybe your subdivision's older, so you under the center line of the road, and his subdivision's newer, so he's got a 60-foot right-of-way in front of his house. So to make things even and consistent. And the second part, of course, is the animal part that comes in. And the first part doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the second part of this. But, so we're here to look at what planning commission's put together and what our planners reviewed and see if it's something we want to go forward with or not. So
Yep. No,
definitely appreciate your coming in.
I appreciate that, and I just encourage to, whenever you're looking for things as kind of positions and references of how to move forward as a township, encourage you to spread the net a little bit further, because I think there's at least somewhat of a, once one does it within a particular area, another one tends to adopt what is similar, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's right and appropriate.
Well, just so you all know, when I was a manager here, I changed the ordinance in the village so we could allow chickens in town, and I was literally mocked at every center region function we went to, because we were a part of the center region, about having chicken ordinances out here. And it wasn't very many years later that there's State College Borough with 4 hens, so.
Mr. Chair.
We were on the cutting edge, let's put it that way, so.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a comment.
Sure.
We are in the center region. However, we are not like the other municipalities within the center region. We're an outlier. We are an agricultural community, heavily agricultural. And I think we should all be proud of that. I think we talk about open space preservation. We have ordinances that require subdivisions to allocate 50% of this area to be open space. Do everything we can from that perspective. But I think this gentleman has brought up some very important points. There is a lot of information, a lot of tools available that I don't think were considered, and I think need to be considered. And I think we should I don't think we should take any action on this. I think we should do a lot more homework and a lot more research before we come to these conclusions. And I do believe that if we proceed along the lines we began here tonight, I think we would cause a lot more problems than we would solve. So I think it's important for us to take this advice. I think it's very good advice. When you look at you've provided an example of Pittsburgh and what they're allowed to do there, and that's a city. That's the real city. And we're in the country. And I personally have a lot of concern about where this is heading. So just wanted to make that comment. There's a lot of other people I think want to talk, and I want to yield them the time to talk, and we can draw our conclusions later. Thank you.
Anybody else have anything they want to add?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. I have a question, and that is Dave just said, John just said something about you can't sell anything if you're in the R1. What about people selling eggs? There's a lot of people sell eggs.
Yep. Well, that's something to consider.
That could fall under the home occupation,
I was gonna say, I don't think we.
but I mean, it just,
Better definition would be.
It also defined, I think it might under be Pennsylvania guidelines, that commercial is $10,000 of sales and more.
it's gross.
Gross.
So that falls under right to farm. So that's for and that has a definition for normal agricultural operations, which what he's describing, harvesting of bees is that. So, I mean, that would.
It just sort of makes me cringe, the fact we have to go consult regulations as to see if someone has a few extra dozen eggs, so they, cut some flowers, have a few extra vegetables the kids want to sell. You shouldn't have to consult regulations for things like that.
And there are other considerations and allowances within the state of Pennsylvania to be able to sell directly from, unless there's a township that prohibits it. So that's the whole premise of this, is whenever there's something else out there that provides for the ability of a community to be able to kind of fend for themselves and really move forward in that way, what value does it provide to eliminate that for those individuals just because they're not in that larger property, that ag property, that property that, quite frankly, of the 85% of the taxes that are paid, probably 80% couldn't afford to buy.
Well, I'm going to correct a few things here. Just you're right. I don't know where the 85 comes from, but years ago when we were talking with the Center Region people, there's a cost. Like farmers require nothing. When you have a farmer in your township, they pay real estate and earn income taxes the same as everybody else. It's maybe not as much as you do, but they require nothing. And when you have houses with, on 1 acre lots or whatever, I think this crowd is one of you guys probably don't require much from the township, but there's also a group of people out there that say, You know, it'd be really nice if we had the trucks come around and grind up all our tree limbs that fall down, and it'd be nice if we had a police department, it'd be nice if we had sidewalks. Those people exist. They may not be here tonight, but they do exist. So, as the township grows, we are forced to require more and more things, and I know it's a little off topic, but generally, it costs $1.25 in services for the residential homes as compared to about 60, 80 cents for a farm community house. So the game lands, it's a winner for us. It asks for nothing. Farmers, same way. They ask for nothing. People in this room probably ask for nothing, but there's another group of people that aren't in this room tonight that if they could get the police, the sidewalks, the street lights, whatever, they would have those things here, and those are high dollar services.
And that's what I would pose that back to the board, that would be the position of the board, because this is a community in a township that was built on the basis of agriculture. Even extending to a college that's built on agriculture but has been since kind of lost in the dust. They don't even necessarily recognize themselves as an agricultural college.
They hide that.
They hide it, but that's what they started out as.
Yep.
So, and that's what I worry about, is the influence of the few will diminish the opportunities of the many.
Well, I would make a further comment to add. Penn State University is a land-grant institution. It's the only one of its kind in the state. They provide the county agent service as required by law, but they are given that charter. That means that they're an agricultural university. So,
Whether they want to admit it.
I know, because I was an employee there for.
All right. Is there any?
I appreciate.
Yeah, I don't mean to cut you off, but is there anybody else would like to add anything? Because we still have. Yes, ma'am.
My name's Patty Dills, and I live on Mahala Street. I lived in Ferguson Township, and I also worked in their zoning department. I left there to come here for the freedom to have animals on my land. I owned a horse. All my life I grew up in 4-H. I actually was the first female in 1972 to join the FFA in my high school. And also, the person who helped me through that was Miss Hartle's father, because he ran the FFA class and taught ag, and that was my heart. I grew up on a chicken farm with 100,000 chickens, and granted, you're not getting them here, I don't even care about that, but it's the point that why are we even going down this road? If something's not broken, why? There's no reason to fix it. I mean, that's my thing. And we work really hard and keep our land nice and clean for the few animals we have. I have to have it neat and orderly, the same as anything else. But I just don't understand why we're doing this. I mean, what about children that want to be in 4-H and they want to raise a cow or a beef steer? They're only going to have it temporarily, and it goes to the fair. So where's their opportunity to enjoy that? And I'm going to tell you what, raising animals, having horses and all the animals we have, taught my whole family responsibility, to be honorable, to be honest, and to live the right kind of, and it helped me in my other jobs. I worked for Ferguson Township Police. I worked in their ordinance department. I was a 911 dispatcher. All those things, you don't think about that. But they gave me that backbone to do the right thing. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Nobody else has any questions?
Hi, I'm Amanda Maitland. I live on Winesap Drive. I am a beekeeper. And that was my biggest concern, I'm going to be honest, when I first heard this. I've lived here 12 years, and this is my first time coming to a township meeting. I have watched them, I've listened, I've heard comments, but when I heard that bees were going to be a concern, well, first it was concerning because they are domesticated livestock, and they are animals. And when I heard, I'm on an acre of property, and I'm like, my bees can fly 10 miles a day. no matter what kind of fencing or setbacks I have, will not keep them on my 1 acre. And I'm gonna be honest, a lot of my neighbors don't even know I have bees. You will walk by my property and you will not know I have bees. But I do follow what is it called, the Pennsylvania bee law, because I am inspected yearly by the Department of Agriculture. They come out to make sure I'm abiding by all the rules and regulations, along with my husband here. And then my second concern was, I have, like I said, I was raised with my 3rd generation bee farmers, or beekeepers are my children, and I was concerned about 4-H projects, because I'm like, we don't have 3 acres. What about these rabbits? You know, and rabbits are considered domestic livestock, especially if you have meat rabbits for 4-H. And I was concerned about that, because how much land does a rabbit in a hutch really need? So I think it's really important to look at these items, even though we're not on 3 acres, we're on 1 acre. We're good citizens to this community. We keep our land nice. We're good to our neighbors. I just feel like when this all came out 2 weeks ago, I felt like there was such a divide in this community. I felt it. The worst I've ever felt in the 12 years I've lived here. Are we not gonna wave to neighbors now because, oh wait, you have 3 acres and I only have 1, but you can have a 4-H project and my son can't? I think we really need to look at that instead of just doing a blanket and just saying, okay, all animals, you have to have 3 acres. I think it's very important. Lastly, I've spent more time in the last 2 weeks looking at every township in this area on beekeeping. I learned that our governor has multiple beehives in Harrisburg at the governor's mansion. I mean, I've looked into more things than I thought I ever would. And then I also looked into, you know, we keep hearing grandfathering and how properties will be non-conforming. And we almost act like that's okay and it's not a big deal. But, you know, I started looking at the legalities of that. And there's attorneys that focus on this as a full-time job. So it is a big deal. When you become a non-conforming property, it can be serious legal and monetary consequences. You know, you got to file as a non-conforming property, and there can be costs associated with that. Property values could also be affected because, let's face it, you have buyers coming in. And in Patton Township, they can have hens. Well, if we can't have hens, why would they want to buy my house? And also they want to deal with, if it's grandfathered, did I have the right animals that grandfathered it? And then the negative connotation if it's a non-conforming property. And then I also found out lenders, there are some lenders that are concerned with, you know, providing money to people that are going to have a non-conforming property. So I just don't want us to say, oh, just say you're non-conforming. It is a bigger deal than just saying, you know, your grandfather is non-conforming. I think it's important to realize that as well. And then also understanding what the definition of small animal is, large animal, what is domesticated livestock. Because not necessarily everybody realizes bees are animals, they're pollinators, they're domesticated livestock. Rabbits can be domesticated livestock. So thank you for listening to me, and thank you for your time here. And I think there is a lot of information you need to, you know, look further into instead of just making a blanket statement about animals. So thank you very much.
Thank you for coming in.
Hi, I'm John Krajewicz. I live on Smith Road, 879. And we are living in a time where we're literally in egg shortages. Eggs are extremely expensive. And we're finding out about commercial farming and the unhealthy nature of their animals. And people are trying for health reasons or financial reasons to take. First off, everyone in here at some point moved into this township under certain rules, and to change these rules because more people were moving in is not freedom. It's a big restriction on people's freedoms to do what they want, and as was just mentioned, it impacts people's property values. A few complaints or a handful of complaints doesn't doesn't justify what you're trying to do here. Those complaints can be taken to a civil court. Those complaints can be taken to proper authorities. It's not the township's job to justify every complaint. As mentioned before, it's a very dangerous road to come by. Now, what do we do next? Do we have, that people are finding that there's Roundup in 90-some% of people's blood. So are you going to start restricting Roundup use? And are you going to start restricting, because I could find about 100 people to complain about that in this place. Or are you going to start the people who spray with True Green? The 2,4-D is 2 chemical compositions away from being Agent Orange. Are you going to restrict that too? Do you restrict light pollution because it affects migratory birds? Do you restrict dogs being on leashes, or penalize people when their dog gets out of their fence? I mean, what kind of road are we coming down? And the only reason I'm saying this is because we're taking steps in this direction of government oppression. And it's not okay. Every single person, I believe, in this room just wants freedom. If you have a problem, we don't need our planning commission to become an HOA and govern us all. We all moved out here to get away from that. What we need is people to just have their freedoms, speak to their neighbors, and go to court if you have a problem, not go to the township. That's in my opinion, you're changing the nature. I have kids in 4-H, 2 kids in 4-H, and I don't want their rights to be 20 years later when they try to teach their kids to raise chickens or raise a goat in their backyard. And there's different sized pigs. What are you going to do? Come up with every single reason for every single size animal? This is ridiculous. You guys are not the professionals. As was mentioned before, there's already things in place to do this. We don't need over-govern. That's not why we elected you here. We elected you here to protect our rights. We elected you here to stand up for us and protect our rights. And there will be, after you, whatever you think. It sounds like every single board member is, not every single board member, but it seems like the board members are saying, I think, and they're wondering what I think. Well, 5 years from now, we're going to have a different board. And what are they going to think? Are they going to think no Roundup? So all you farmers can't use that now, because we've now set this precedence that when somebody complains, this is how we handle it. We go and make an ordinance. Well, and by the way, I think landowners should have the right to use that if they want, even if, because it's on their land. But I just think that we're in a time when people are going to need to raise food, and we're also in a time where all these subdivisions, they were once farms. So this farmland has been taken, and if people want to take, maybe my family only has enough money to afford an acre or an acre and a half. And maybe I want to teach my son how to raise a goat. And maybe he goes up and starts some company and can buy a bigger farm and farms on a bigger scale later. Maybe it's because of that love I gave him. And I appreciate you all listening to me. I'm not coming down on you as a board. I'm just asking you to give us freedom. That's what we want.
Is there anybody else? All right.
I'm Gail Jones. I live on Winesap Drive as well. My husband and I moved out here 22 years ago. We were zoned A1. We did a lot of research. We bought our property in a development that had an HOA. But my HOA said that these properties could have larger animals. We planned to have horses down the road. We couldn't afford it because we had kids. They played sports. We traveled. We finally have them.
I get it.
So, again, 2006, they changed us to R1, or whatever date you guys want to go by. So, that all being said, we've had enough changes. We don't need more regulations. I called 4-H. There are 426 participants in Center County. 45 of them are in Halfmoon, well, I can't say, they couldn't say Halfmoon Township, but in the 16870 zip code. That's a good portion of the 4-H kids. And I'm sure a lot of them are on 1 acre lots, maybe raising bunnies. So I just think we don't need any more restrictions. I respectfully would like to give you 200 signatures,
all right,
or more than 200 signatures from the residents of Halfmoon Township.
I'll hand that to Amy for the record. Yep.
Stiff there. Bruce Helms, 45-year resident. I wasn't going to speak tonight because, in part, I don't have any skin in the game. I'm not R1. But I'm hearing some things that I think do need some reinforcement. Full disclosure, I am running for supervisor. I align with Ron in the sense that I want to know what the clear problem is before we start writing ordinances around it. I see two distinct parts. The setback portion, I think, is already on the books. We're making some tweaks to it. And frankly, I didn't hear any dissension, really. I think we're at a point where everybody's pretty happy with the setback part. Part B, the animal part, there's where I want to know what the problem is. I think that can be defined. I hear that there's complaints. I don't know specifically what they are, aside from the one mini steer farm down there on Lutz Lane. Why can't those complaints be condensed into a small, this is the problem, and then find the appropriate language and put it in the nuisance ordinance to drive that? I know there's people in this room that are going to say we've got to move forward. We've already spent a lot of money on this. The worst thing supervisors can do is vote to throw more good money after bad. And with that, I'll stand down. Thank you very much. Thank you. Number 3 on the Republican ballot, you can write me in otherwise.
Yeah, go ahead and then we'll let.
So if this does go through, how are you going to enforce it? How are you going to enforce all the non-conforming properties? Are we going to go out and inspect?
There's a process in the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code for how that's to be done. There's a lot of rules, and I'll tell you, there's a lot of regulations that townships have or have to have because the state forces us to do things. This is not something that the state's forcing us, but the state does put out parameters as to how rules and regulations are being enforced. And we also rely on our legal counsel, whether we like their opinion or not. You know, that's something different. But it's not an easy thing being.
Right, are you gonna inspect every property?
Well, that's not usually how it goes. Generally, like, you know, in Patton Township, where I spent a little bit of my life growing up, mostly in Ferguson, which used to be a great place, and can't say that it's that much fun anymore, but they're, you know, they have people riding around to make people's lives miserable. They call them code enforcement or ordinance enforcement officers, but I don't see that's going to be the case here. And I can just speak back to the time I was here. You know, usually we didn't go out looking for trouble unless there was a problem. Somebody had a problem. The issue is, how do you deal with it after the fact? Okay, and I'm not going to go into details. Maybe we can have a private conversation someday, because I don't want to divulge anything that's unfair to some citizen. So I think what they were just looking, the planning commission was looking for, staff was looking for, is a way to keep this problem in check. Because we have a problem, but I think the problem is probably gone. And I agree with you. You know, it's unfortunate you get one person does a really bad thing, and everybody else goes crazy because they want to deal with it. And the township sitting there saying, we don't have a regulation against it. You know, and so this was staff and the PC's idea, that they bring it forward to the planning commission. Anybody can put an idea out there for the planning commission to review, or staff to take a look at, or the elected officials to look at. If you walked in here and said, hey, we need an ordinance to enforce fireworks in the township, you know, that could be put forth and the township can look at it. So I don't want to sit there and say, well, this is a bad idea, because the world's full of bad ideas, and once in a while we get some great ideas walk through the door. But that's why your elected officials are up here to take a look at this thing and say, we went down through the process and we kind of said, what do we think is reasonable? But we didn't vote on the entire ordinance. We haven't voted to send the ordinance anywhere. And as the other gentleman said, you know, we didn't really complain about the setbacks. And actually, the setbacks are better if you want to put a shed in your yard after this than before. And the definition helps the zoning officer when they build new houses or a subdivision plan goes in and says, now we're going to go from the center line of the road, so it's consistent. So, I mean, I personally have no issues with part one. And part two, we've got a lot of questions here that we need to take a look at. And we've definitely heard from the public tonight. Like I said also, you know, it depends on what crowd walks in that door, because I've had crowds that were completely the opposite. Not necessarily on animals, but some other things. I think most of the people in here are fairly conservative individuals, for the most part. I'm gonna guess you're probably Republicans or something. And you're coming in here and you're saying, hey, I want more freedom. But there will be another group of people who come in here and say, well, I think we ought to regulate this, we ought to regulate that. And we're just trying to balance everybody's needs, and that's really, sometimes that's really hard to do. But let me go over here. Somebody we all know from a long time.
Been gone for a year and a half or so, but I'm back. I'm Lauren Nauman. I live on Loveville Road. I was a 19-year member of the Planning Commission. I helped pinpoint areas on that map. Ron, to answer your question about why A1 to R1, what spurred it was the development pressure in 2000s. We had A1, which you could do anything you wanted to with no controls. We didn't have places to put any commercial, industrial, or any other auxiliary uses within the township. And so the Planning Commission was tasked with coming up with a use map, trying to put similar uses in similar areas. And the residential area got established because it was primarily residential. We've addressed this question of animals in R1 for the third time. Both times previously, the consensus from the Planning Commission was to the Board of Supervisors was to table it. I had been asked twice in both of those reviews, once in about 2005 when we did the recodification of our zoning ordinances, and again in 2012 when we redid the RPD, and we couldn't come up with a consensus of how many's too many, how's big is it's too big, and how much ground is necessary to maintain whatever. I always supported the 4-H members because my kids were in 4-H. They enjoyed their time there, and they learned a lot. We had numerous crazy days out at the fair. The school district used to start school after the fair finished because it accommodated the 4-H kids to participate without docking them for school days. That's all changed. So one of the options is to table it until you do some more research. But there's situations that have happened in the township where non-compatible uses have popped up in the residential area. So you have to define what's a non-compatible use in the R area. And it sounds like most people here are pretty happy having their few chickens, 4-H animals, horses in the backyard. But there's probably one elephant in the room that nobody wanted to address, and that is if a realtor calls the township and says, Sam over here has a property, he's got 1.5 acres, it's zoned residential. How can I market that property? What can you have on it? Can you have cows? Can you have horses? What can you do with your property? And right now in the zoning, it does not spell out. It's the same as the agriculture. You can do whatever you want there. It's just that it's been zoned residential for the purpose of having like use within that area. You can't spot zone. You can't go and say this property's in, that one and that one's out because they got horses. No, this one over here, you have to pick a general area, put a line around it, and kind of consolidate those general uses to meet state standards, state regulations. And so that's my input. It's a quick history.
I knew you were here, but I didn't want to put my finger on you, if you didn't want to talk.
But, it seems to me like most people here, and I didn't know, I was looking for the number of 4-Hers that may be in the township. But we have over 1,000 kids in this township, 2,700 population. We got 1,022 going to school on school buses in the state college. That's a pretty high number of the population. And I personally don't want to see those kids denied that opportunity. I mean, we had a 110-acre farm. It wasn't a problem. We've got 13 acres right now. We can do what we want. But a lot of people were addressing the smaller acreages that were either in the R1 and their small acreages still in the A1. But if they have that interest, one solution is to table the conversation until you kind of come up with a definition of either how to define the nuisance and correct it, or define the use and what can happen on the property so that someone can field the question, is somebody selling or representing that property? Because the realtors don't want to get stuck in the jam of saying, you can have this, this, and this. And then you find out after the owner buys it, they go, I can't have that. And now the realtor's stuck for libel or misrepresentation of a property. And so that is one of the elephants, I think, in the room as to why this has come up, is how do you define compatible uses within the R1 so that it's consistent, everybody's on the same playing field, and those questions that come in like that can be fielded in a logistical manner. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Okay. Hopefully we can get on with our meeting here. Everybody done?
Hi, I'm Ryan Harpster. I live on Loveville. After talking to people out the past these few weeks, I keep hearing, well, you're lucky you live on Loveville. You don't have to worry about it. It's a slippery slope.
Oh, you're going to say it's not Ferguson Township?
It's just a slippery slope for us to go right back. And you said everybody on Loveville got together and wrote a letter. Everybody here tonight is writing their letter. You guys need to hear it and see what the community is coming together to say for it. People that are against it, if you are here, I haven't heard them bring up any complaints. They're not showing any side of the other side of this. On Loveville, 2 summers ago, we had an issue with livestock getting out in other people's houses and going around flower beds and scratching up and shitting places they're not supposed to. The state police will come in and fine you, and if you aren't compliant, the state police will take your animals. You guys don't have to do that. There's already people in place to take care of these nuisances, the complaints you're getting. If that's the complaint you're getting, tell them to call the state police. But it's us. We're here. We're trying to show what we want for this community, and we're present tonight. We've been here since 7 o'clock. We're all here. That's all I have to say.
And you've been very patient.
I've been trying.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion.
Sure.
I move that we permanently table this ordinance as it's written, and that we introduce an ordinance specifically addressing setbacks. With regard to animals, I think we need to have a lot more research and a lot more discussion before we try to push that part of this ordinance. So that's my motion. We table the entire proposal, and that we split this out between setbacks and animals. The setback could be introduced as a separate change, and we can take action on that at a future meeting. The other part of it, the animals, I think needs further research and further discussion. And I think if we don't do that, I think we are in jeopardy.
I was going to ask if maybe you would modify your motion.
Is that the proper process? What's the
That-
proper process?
We don't have an ordinance, we have a proposal.
We have a proposal.
It's come forward to
but it's a combined proposal combining two
Right,
things,
but-
setbacks and animals.
But under this proposal, I think the board has generally outlined what they agree upon. What they agree upon is everything with the exception of keeping of non-commercial livestock, the ag operations, the public and private daycare facilities, and the setbacks for the houses and the roads. And I would recommend that be put in an ordinance form, excluding the agricultural amendments, and passed on to the solicitor.
Wait, what do you, I'm not following what you're saying.
Okay, well, what I'm trying to say is,
Basically saying you're asking for-
we know we have a problem with setback definitions in that upper part A, with the exception of the non-commercial domestic livestock.
We've also had consensus on how what we can live with to change.
Right.
That's
What
what
I'm
you say,
what
just
I'm
take out the
saying
animal
is,
part.
take the stuff we
Leave the
agree
rest.
about and have the staff write that up and then send it on to the solicitor for review. And then the agricultural stuff, whoever wants to spearhead that can come back and.
Right, but I don't want this moving forward in total.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
So that's why I was saying
We
table
dump
the whole
dump
thing.
the ag stuff, keep the setbacks for the street frontage and the buildings and the sheds, because that ordinance, number one, like I said, it's gonna define the front setback, which we don't have a good definition right now. It's gonna allow people to put sheds on their property down to 15 feet, and keeps new houses going into the township at a 30-foot distance from their property line. And everything else is just building heights, which is basically the same, it's just
Right,
part of the chart.
that's essentially the same thing I'm saying.
All right, well, if you wanna make your motion.
He's just saying modify the existing one to make it.
If
But
you wanna
take
make
out
your-
the ag part.
Right, that's what I'm saying. If you want to make your motion that,
Okay, I'll
I'm sure you
move
can get a
that we
second.
take out the ag part completely, and that we modify this to include the setbacks we discussed,
Yeah.
Okay, the building
Basically
heights,
Part A.
the building heights I don't think have changed anyhow.
No.
Okay, impervious surfaces
Yep.
and structures.
Yep.
That probably hasn't changed either. So I'm
We're
okay.
redefining the
I'm okay
impervious
with that.
surface. Okay. So, do I hear a second to Ron's semi-convoluted thing there? But does anybody want a definition on that?
I don't know. I thought I was pretty clear.
What we're looking at is building setbacks, impervious surface, and that's about it. It's a building
And we
height
table the
regulation.
animal part.
Everything that's in Part A, with the exception of the non-commercial keeping of domestic livestock, that gets scratched.
That
And then
table,
when you get down to Part B, all Part B, which is all the animal stuff, is scratched.
Yeah. And the rest of it's gonna go to the solicitor.
Yep.
That's what we're going with.
Yeah, no animal stuff.
I'll second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion by the board? Call for the question. Oh, Betty, you?
Well, and that's for this, to hand this off to the solicitor, but then we're gonna circle back around and.
Still
we'll
has to
do more
follow this
research on the
process.
animal.
Well, we definitely have to do more research.
To see if we're- to
There's
see
too many
where- if we're
unanswered
gonna-
questions.
Exactly.
And I like the suggestion of how do you regulate?
Yeah.
When people are bad actors, they're the people that need to be regulated.
But also property rights
But-
infringement is my
Right.
key concern.
Okay, just so
So-
it's gonna get a.
Okay, so we got a motion, second, any other discussion? Call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Okay. Got through that. Township reports. Does anybody have anything to add or anything exciting going on? I know it's getting late.
No.
I know it's late,
So
I'm
like-
sorry, but while everybody's here, I just want everybody to be aware. Earlier today, I was involved in a very minor accident with a township truck. I was hit in the back corner. There's no damage to our truck at all. The person that hit me, there was some minor damage, no injuries or anything like that, but just want everybody to be
Everybody's safe and secure.
Everybody's safe. There's a Patton Township officer came out and wrote a report for me, so everything's all good.
Okay, good.
But just wanted to make sure everyone's aware of it, so there's no
Yeah, we don't
no
want
rumors
surprises.
floating around.
Okay, thank
Before
you.
you see it on Channel 10.
Yeah, you never.
Mr. Chair, I have one thing, apologize because my Upper Bald Eagle cog report got added a little late, but I know it's up there. But one thing I do want to point out, which is a congratulations to our fire chief, is John Witherite is now a state certified instructor, and this is the first for Port Matilda Fire Company. So this opens up a lot of opportunities for potential in-house training, not only for our Port Matilda firefighters, but they could offer training for other firefighters in the future at an at-cost rate. So I think that's something that needs to be recognized of the certification that John received, so.
Good.
That's good.
Do you have anything else? I hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I hear a second. Second. Moving second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you. The meeting is adjourned at 9:42 PM.